Chapter 426. Go to watch net. While the lobby manager was thinking about how to deal with the situation, Director Gong asked the two policemen behind him loudly, "Are you here to arrest Child Li?" The policeman named Xiao Zhang was tongue-tied. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat that kept rolling down. His tongue seemed to be tied, and he couldn't speak. The other policeman named Xiao Lu was obviously much smarter. He said loudly, "Director, we are here to understand the situation." Director Gong glanced at him and was secretly satisfied with his alertness and response. He nodded and said, "Well, how is the situation?" Xiao Lu couldn't help but sweat rolling down his body. He looked at Chao Kefi and then at Li Yundong, complaining to himself, "Oh my god, how can I take back what I just said? Isn't this like slapping myself in the face?" But when his eyes fell on the lobby manager, he suddenly had an idea. "I got it. My friend in the Tao will die, but I won't. I've found a scapegoat." Xiao Lu pointed to the lobby manager and said loudly, "Manager Wang knows the best. Let him speak." Manager Wang was so angry that he almost cursed out loud. "Motherf ***, it's fine that you often come to my place to catch a few prostitutes. How dare you frame me? You really can't be trusted." But as angry as he was, he still had to say something. Manager Wang wiped the sweat from his forehead and said in a hollow voice, "In fact, it's just a small misunderstanding. Child Li is just eager to save people." It's okay, it's okay. It's just a small matter." As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something and thought to himself, "Damn it, if these two stinky policemen can push this kind of trouble to me, can't I push it to someone else?" As he said this, he turned his head and shouted at the security guards behind him, "Are you injured or not?" The security guards were dumbfounded. They hadn't expected that such a big responsibility would be thrown to them one after another. They secretly cursed, but the lobby manager was the brother-in-law of the new mistress of the chairman of Dihao. No matter how much they complained, they didn't dare to offend him. "Go to watch net." The security guards all said with sad faces, "No, we're not injured at all." Manager Wang said angrily, "If you're not injured, why are you shouting? The flood nearly destroyed the Dragon King temple." These security guards were so aggrieved that they were about to cry. They all drooped their heads and dared not speak up. Seeing this, Li Yundong also said, "It's not their fault. It's my fault. Just let it go." Unexpectedly, Director Gong suddenly shouted, "No, we can't go there like this." At this time, everyone couldn't help but look at the chameleon director strangely. They thought to themselves, "Is this director going crazy again, going to enforce the law impartially?" Director Gong said righteously, "Child Li, you came to Dihao to save people at such a late hour. What kind of spirit is this?" This was a spirit of abandoning oneself and forgetting others. This was a chivalrous spirit. This is a kind of dedication that is missing in our current society. This spirit must be vigorously propagated and carried forward. I want everyone in Tiannan City to know young Master Li's chivalrous heart. When he said this, almost all the people around him almost vomited on the spot. They all looked at Director Gong strangely and thought to themselves, "You were the one who said that you would arrest people before. Now you don't want to arrest them, but you're actually flattering them shamelessly. It's too disgusting, isn't it?" Chao Yi couldn't help but look at the director of the Public Security Bureau with disdain and spit in her heart. Everyone loved flattery, and even Li Yundong was no exception. However, Li Yundong was a little overwhelmed by this kind of heavyweight flattery. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, "Director Gong, there's no need for that, is there?" Director Gong thought that Li Yundong was pretending to be polite, so he dragged his voice and said, "Hey, Child Li, what are you talking about? How can you not use it? This is a great opportunity to publicize and educate the general public." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart and muttered in his heart, "I guess that after you finish the publicity, I will become a spoiled brat in the eyes of the general public." Li Yundong quickly waved his hand and said, No, there's really no need. Keep a low profile, you have to keep a low profile. Director Gong suddenly understood and said with admiration, after all, Child Li's realm is high. I admire you. Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, No, Director Gong, you're too polite. I have one thing I want to ask Director Gong for help with. After that, he whispered a few words in Director Gong's ear. When Director Gong heard this, he was immediately overjoyed. He patted his chest and said, This is a small matter, no problem. When do you want this report, Child Li? I'll send it to you. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, You'd better give it to me as soon as possible. In addition, as for today's matter, I can settle it with Manager Wang in private. There's no need to involve so many people in these things. Li Yundong's words were unintentional, but both Director Gong and Manager Wang were listening attentively. Director Gong laughed and said, Well, you guys have a good agreement. If there's any bad agreement, Child Li, you can come to me. As he said this, he glanced at Manager Wang intentionally or unintentionally. Manager Wang suddenly shivered and gritted his teeth with hatred in his heart. Damn it, Director Gong is threatening me. F***ck, I'm going to bleed again today. I just don't know how big this Child Li's appetite is. Thinking of this, Manager Wang clenched his trouser pocket tightly. He forced a smile on his face and said to Li Yundong, Child Li, can I have a word with you? Li Yundong nodded and walked to a deserted place in the corridor with Manager Wang. Just as Li Yundong was about to speak, Manager Wang rushed to say, Child Li, I know that I didn't recognize Mount Tai today and offended you. Please be merciful and let me live. How much do you want? Name a price. As long as I can afford it, I'll send it over without hesitation. When Li Yundong heard this, he was stunned and thought to himself, No way. It was obviously me who caused trouble. How did it become him paying me? Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's blank expression. He gritted his teeth and said, Child Li, 100,000 yuan, 100,000 yuan. What do you think? Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, Damn it, such a small matter can be worth 100,000 yuan? Is this more powerful than extortion? Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and his heart was bleeding with hatred. He said again, Child Li, it's not easy for us to do business. Please give us 200,000 yuan. What do you think? At this time, Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang's eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were so ferocious that he seemed to want to sell his mother. He quickly shook his head and said, No, I didn't mean that. Manager Wang's face turned pale and he cried in his heart, Damn it, what do you mean? You don't want money. What do you want? The woman around you is so beautiful, and you have a big star. I don't think I need to find a woman for you. You don't want money, you don't want women, what do you want? Ah, by the way, didn't Director Gong say that he opened a tea house before? Yes, it must be like this. Child Li is probably afraid of leaving something behind, so he must be counting on me to buy his tea house voucher. Humph, what a wishful thinking. Manager Wang's heart skipped a beat and he said, Child Li, I know that you opened a tea house. How about I use public funds to buy your tea house voucher of 200,000 yuan every year? Li Yundong was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, is this guy out of his mind? Does he have too much money to spend? Manager Wang saw that Li Yundong still didn't speak, and thought that Li Yundong wouldn't agree, so he asked tentatively, How about 300,000 yuan? Young Master Li, please say something. Oh, I beg you, 400,000 yuan, 400,000 yuan, no more. If it's more, I won't be able to explain. Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He had a strange expression on his face and thought to himself, Does this guy think I'm a rich second generation who wants to rip me off? Manager Wang's heart trembled when he saw Li Yundong's strange expression. He suddenly gritted his teeth and said, 500,000 yuan, Child Li, I'm very sincere. Please say something. Li Yundong saw that Manager Wang was about to go crazy. If he didn't say anything, he was afraid that this guy would want to dig his ancestors' graves. He quickly said, don't add it anymore. Manager Wang finally let out a sigh of relief. At this time, he only wanted to send this god of plague away as soon as possible. He couldn't care about anything else now. Manager Wang immediately said, Child Li, a gentleman's word is as fast as a whip. I'll send someone to your tea house tomorrow to settle this matter. You can rest assured that I won't dare to lie to you. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, No, it's not that. Manager Wang trembled with fear. His legs trembled and he thought to himself, what else can this man do? Oh my God, I'd better run away quickly. I can't afford to offend him, can't I? Manager Wang didn't wait for Li Yundong to speak again. He grabbed Li Yundong's hand and shook it twice. It's a deal, Child Li, he said loudly. I'll go deal with other things first. I'll come back later to apologize. After that, he turned around and ran away, as if the back of his pants was on fire. Li Yundong was stunned on the spot. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Damn it, am I that scary? Why can't I be a good person these days? But on second thought, he couldn't help but sigh at the power of worldly power. A misunderstanding could solve the business problem of the tea house. This was equivalent to signing a business order of 500,000 yuan. Should I accept the money or not? Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly for a moment. Just as he was hesitating about whether to return the money or not, he suddenly heard Chao Kefi calling his name behind him. Li Yundong looked back and saw that Chao Kefi was wearing a fur coat, which made her look elegant and extraordinary. She looked at him with a lazy and charming face and said with a smile, What are you daydreaming about? I've called you several times. Li Yundong came to his senses and said with a smile without thinking, I was thinking that it's really strange recently. Wherever I go, I can meet people I know. Chao Kefi looked at Li Yundong, and for a moment, her eyes were a little dazed. In her impression, this boy was still young and inexperienced a few months ago. Although he had all kinds of magical abilities, he was still an ordinary person after all, and she could even look down on him. But now, she had to stand on her tiptoes and look up to see him. How could a person climb so fast? How high could he climb in the future? Thinking of this, Chao Kefi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She sighed faintly and said, Everyone in the world knows me. Li Yundong was stunned. He didn't know Chao Kefi's thoughts as a woman. He only felt that her words were full of sarcasm and mockery. Li Yundong recalled these words and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Who in the world doesn't know the king? After laughing for a while, he noticed that Chao Kefi was carrying a bag in her hand. Lu Feier and her agent, Sister Hong, were also standing next to her, as if they were going out. He asked curiously, Where are you going? Chao Kefi smiled and said, So many things have happened, and Lu Feier's whereabouts have been discovered by the fans. We have to go back to Sonya as soon as possible. Li Yundong smiled and said, Then be careful on the way. Sister Hong, who was standing to one side, looked at Li Yundong strangely. After experiencing these things, she no longer dared to glare at Li Yundong. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with some reluctance. She waved her hand and smiled sweetly. Hey, Immortal Li, I'll go first. When you have time, you can come to the crew to see me. Li Yundong smiled and waved his hand. Okay, I'll go back when I'm free. Speaking of this, Li Yundong suddenly said to Chao Kefi, By the way, President Chao, can you stay for 2 or 3 days and do me a favor? Chao Kefi didn't want to leave, but she couldn't find a reason to stay. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately beamed with joy and said without hesitation, Okay. Lu Feier snorted. You only care about the opposite sex. Sister Chao, you've gone too far. I'm ignoring you. Chao Kefi smiled and pinched her cheek. Well, I'll compensate you when we go back. Be good, the crew is waiting for you to go back to film. They can't do it without you, but it doesn't matter without me. Lu Feier snorted, and Sister Hong, who was next to her, also tried to persuade her. Feier, listen to President Chow. You really should go back. Do you want to stay and see the headlines of the entertainment section of Tiannan Daily tomorrow? Only then did Lu Feier say resentfully, well, you two don't have to sing a duet. I know. After that, she got into the elevator with flagging interest. After watching her and her agent disappear from his sight, Li Yundong whispered a few words to Chow Kefi. Hearing this, Chow Kefi was slightly shocked and blurted out, you want me to continue pretending to be dead? Li Yundong smiled and said, no, so many people have seen that you're not dead. I just want you to continue pretending to be half dead. Chow Kefi asked curiously, why? Li Yundong smiled confidently. It's very simple. Don't you want to know who wants to kill you? Humph, this is called inviting the enemy to enter the urn. Chapter 427. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong returned home, it was already late at night, but the house was still brightly lit. Everyone was waiting for his return. Watch net. 7 KOM. Zi Yuan was sitting cross-legged in a corner with her eyes closed. The three Shibwa of the Fox Zen school were sitting cross-legged on the carpet near the sofa, as if they were meditating and practicing qi. Zhou Qin paced back and forth at the balcony door, her head lowered as she pondered about something. Ruan Hongling and the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were sitting on the carpet in the middle of the living room, watching the evening news on the TV station. Su Chan was sitting on the side closest to the balcony, hugging her knees and resting her chin on them. Although her face was facing the TV, her eyes glanced out of the balcony from time to time. After living in the secular world for a while, the little foxes gradually became accustomed to television and had a general understanding of the contents of the television. As they watched the news, they whispered to each other, hey, do you think we're in the news? I don't know, but there should be. I think I saw a guy shooting for a while. Didn't fourth junior sister say that she saw the news in Tiannan City when she came back tonight? Can you watch the replay now? Idiot, the evening news is not a repeat. You don't even know that. Yes, you're smart. You watched the news broadcast as if it was a TV drama. While they were arguing in a low voice, a little fox suddenly pointed at the TV in surprise and shouted, look, it's our Desanxian. As soon as she said this, the little foxes immediately gathered in front of the TV. Zhou Qin also stopped and looked at the TV. Even the three Shibwa of the Fox Zen school opened their eyes, leaned over, and watched curiously. Only Zi Yuan opened her eyes slightly, smiled, and then closed them again. Su Chan pointed at the TV and shouted in surprise, it's me. Look, it's me. The little foxes also pointed at themselves on the TV excitedly. Me too. Those who couldn't find it shouted, damn it, I didn't even see myself, and the image is gone. Ruan Hongling saw that the little foxes' faces were almost glued to the TV. Their heads were shaking, so she couldn't find them for a long time. She couldn't help but say sourly, you're really ignorant. What's so strange about being on TV? As soon as she finished speaking, Su Chan turned around and said with a smile, Hongling, I see you. When Ruan Hongling heard this, she immediately leaned over and widened her eyes. Where? Su Chan had a mischievous smile on her face. She stuck out her tongue and giggled. The scene is over. Ruan Hongling immediately said angrily, are you playing with me? Su Chan shook her head and said, well, it's nothing. Hongling, you're right. What's so strange about being on TV? It doesn't matter if you don't see it, right? Ruan Hongling was furious. She stared at Su Chan with her eyes wide open and thought to herself, well, she wants to fight with me. This little fox spirit, it's fine if she can't get along with me on normal days, but how dare she challenge me at this time? The two of them were staring at each other like fighting cocks. Zhou Qin suddenly pushed open the door on the balcony and said with a smile, Master, you're back? Su Chan turned her head abruptly and said in surprise, Yundong is back? At this time, everyone in the living room stood up and looked at the balcony in unison. They saw Li Yundong walking in from the balcony with a sullen face. Everyone saw Li Yundong's serious expression. As soon as he entered the living room, the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. They all looked at each other for a moment, not knowing what had happened and feeling uneasy. Seeing Li Yundong like this, although Su Chan was also a little nervous, she still relied on her close relationship with Li Yundong to ask boldly, Yundong, what happened? Li Yundong glanced at her, patted her head, and then smiled slightly. It's nothing. President Chao was attacked. Ah! Everyone suddenly exclaimed. Su Chan couldn't help grabbing Li Yundong's hand and asking with concern, what's going on, Yundong? Is President Chao all right? Li Yundong's eyes quickly swept across the crowd. He shook his head and said, she's fine now. I've already taken her to the hospital. Zhou Qin asked, is President Chao being chased by debt collectors again? Li Yundong shook his head and said, no, someone deliberately wanted to kill her. Zhou Qin couldn't help frowning. Who wanted to kill her? What kind of enemy does she have? Li Yundong said in a deep voice, I don't know, but I think President Chao will tell us when she wakes up. At this time, Chao Yi couldn't help but ask in surprise, is President Chao all right? Li Yundong glanced at her and said with a smile, she should be fine. She's still in the hospital for observation. Chao Yi couldn't help patting her chest and said with a smile, Ba, that's great. Li Yundong smiled noncommittally and said, well, it's over for the time being. The police have already arranged for someone to protect her. Nothing will happen to her again. As he spoke, he nodded to Zi Yuan and winked at Zhou Qin. Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, come to my room. Also, everyone, go to bed. It's late. Everyone immediately scattered and went back to their rooms. Su Chan saw that Li Yundong had talked to Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, but not her. It was obvious that he felt that she was unreliable and not a person to discuss things with. She pouted and was a little unhappy, but soon, her eyes rolled and a sly smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. After Li Yundong entered the room, he watched Zhou Qin close the door and said in a low voice, Zhou Qin, today's opening ceremony is over. Can you consider preparing to go to the Zhuji phase? Zhou Qin hadn't expected that Li Yundong would call her in and say such a thing. She looked at Li Yundong bitterly, sighed slightly in her heart, and said faintly, are you in such a hurry to drive me away? Li Yundong was stunned for a moment, but then he couldn't help laughing. He waved at Zhou Qin and whispered a few words in her ear. When Zhou Qin heard this, she was surprised and asked, is that okay? Li Yundong smiled confidently and said, don't worry, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, you can continue to move forward and go to the Zhuji phase. If it works, you can just pull out the poisonous thorn in your heart. Zhou Qin thought for a moment, then nodded and said decisively, okay. Then I'll go and prepare. Zi Yuan saw that Zhou Qin's attitude had changed 180 degrees after listening to Li Yundong's words. After Zhou Qin left, she couldn't help laughing and said, what did you say to her? Why are you being so mysterious? Li Yundong chuckled and said, it's a secret. But you'll know soon enough. Zi Yuan couldn't help but say angrily, then why did you call me in? Are you keeping me guessing? Li Yundong smiled and said, don't be angry. I did call you in because I have something to discuss with you. Zi Yuan glared at Li Yundong and said, what's the matter? Hurry up and say it. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan, who had always been as elegant as a fairy, actually showed such a rare look of a girl. Her beautiful eyes were full of hope, and her fairy face was both angry and happy. It was as if a young girl was angry at her boyfriend. Li Yundong was a little stunned, and his gaze made Zi Yuan come back to her senses. She turned her head away awkwardly, her ears blushing and her eyes flickering. For a moment, both of them were a little embarrassed and speechless. There seemed to be a faint ambiguity flowing in the air. After a long time, Li Yundong coughed dryly and told Zi Yuan about what had happened that night. Then he said, when we targeted Zhuang Yiting and Chao Yi, Zhuang Yiting first took the initiative to expose Chao Yi. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? Zi Yuan gradually calmed down. She stroked the black hair at her temples, her eyes narrowed, and she thought for a moment before saying, according to what you just said, there are a few coincidences in what happened tonight. First, why was Chao Kefi attacked? Moreover, the other party tried to kill Chao Kefi by dispersing her soul. This means that this person must be a cultivator. And why would a cultivator risk being struck to death by heavenly thunder to try to kill a mortal like Chao Kefi? Li Yundong nodded and said, that's right. And the second coincidence is, how did this person know where Chao Kefi and the others were staying? Zi Yuan also said naturally, unless this person has been watching Chao Kefi from the beginning and has been following her all the way to the place where she is staying. Li Yundong continued, there is another possibility. That is, this person heard Chao Kefi say where she was staying when Desanxian left. Zi Yuan's eyes suddenly lit up. She smiled coldly and said, hey, did you notice that when Chao Kefi first came, who in the Fox Zen school showed the most unusual emotions? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, you told me about this. Chao Yi and Zhuang Yiting were the most unusual. They looked as if they had seen a visitor from outer space, and their faces were full of shock and disbelief. Zi Yuan nodded slightly and said, it's a pity that their emotions only showed for a moment and soon disappeared. I didn't pay much attention to their other emotions. However, judging from their reactions and our previous inference, the identity of the culprit who attacked Chao Kefi is obvious. It is very likely that the one who attacked Chao Kefi was second Shirboi Yen Fong. Li Yundong nodded slowly. He sighed softly and said, this is also what I don't understand the most. If it was really Yen Fong, why did she attack Chao Kefi? Moreover, she had 10,000 ways to kill Chao Kefi. Why did she choose to shatter Chao Kefi's soul? After pondering for a while, Zi Yuan said, if an ordinary person is killed, his 3 souls and 7 spirits will temporarily stay in his body for a period of time and not dissipate. Just like Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, cultivators can give them a new life by restraining their 3 souls and 7 spirits. But if the other party's soul is forced out of the body, if the soul doesn't return to the body within an hour, although the body is still alive, it will actually become a vegetable. In this way, the other party doesn't have to risk killing the other party and attracting the heavenly thunder, and it can also make it impossible for the other party to gather the soul to resurrect the person. Because once the soul is scattered, the person's spiritual energy will be scattered between heaven and earth, and it can no longer be gathered. Unless. Li Yundong listened attentively. When he heard the last round, he saw that Zi Yuan hesitated slightly and didn't continue, so he asked casually, unless what? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, nothing. In short, this person wants Chao Kefi to become a vegetable, but she doesn't actually want to kill her. Li Yundong didn't take Zi Yuan's hesitation to heart. He continued to ponder what had happened tonight. After thinking for a while, he said, in short, this matter is very strange. Why did Yen Fong attack Chao Kefi? The motive of this matter is very confusing. As he spoke, Li Yundong seemed to think of something. He asked again, by the way, why does Chao Kefi only have 1 soul and 3 spirits? Zi Yuan also shook her head and smiled helplessly. I don't know either. It's the first time I've met such a person. Li Yundong thought for a while, but he couldn't figure it out. He smiled and said, forget it, don't think about it. The truth will come out. Moreover, I feel that in the next 2 days, Yen Fong will not be able to bear it. Tomorrow, she will. Before he could finish his words, he suddenly heard a knock on the door. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, come in. With a creak, the little girl's eyes rolled around and she poked her head in. She asked tentatively, Yundong, can I come in? Li Yundong scolded with a smile, you've already come in half. Can I stuff you back in? Come in. What's the matter? Su Chan jumped in with a smile, threw herself into Li Yundong's arms, and said coquettishly, I have something to talk to you about. Seeing this, Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, I'll go back first. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Li Yundong nodded at her with a smile and said, okay, let's see Zhou Qin off tomorrow. After Su Chan watched Zi Yuan leave, she blinked and asked curiously, is Sister Zhou Qin going to the Zhuji phase tomorrow? Li Yundong nodded and said, yes, her cultivation has improved by leaps and bounds. It can be said that she has made rapid progress. Tomorrow, she should also set foot on the road to the Zhuji phase. By the way, why are you looking for me? Su Chan giggled and said mysteriously, Yundong, there are two things I don't know if I should say to you or not. Li Yundong smiled and said, is there anything you can't say to me? Say it, silly girl. Su Chan nodded. She stood on tiptoe and whispered a few words into Li Yundong's ear. At first, Li Yundong smiled and said, it's just the two of us. Why are you being so mysterious? But soon, the smile on Li Yundong's face disappeared. He asked with a cold expression, is what you said true? Vote for recommendation previous page return to table of contents next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your personal views. Chapter 428. Go to watch net. In the face of Li Yundong's rhetorical question, Su Chan nodded vigorously and said, it's absolutely true. I've confirmed it twice. And last time, I heard someone quarreling with Chao Yi Shibua in her room. Li Yundong frowned and pondered for a while, then asked in a deep voice, who else knows about this? Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, just me. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. A smile appeared on Li Yundong's face. He stroked the girl's hair with relief and said softly, my girl knows how to share my worries and difficulties. Su Chan smiled sweetly. The girl held Li Yundong's arm and said in a sweet voice, I always make trouble for you. I feel sad, so I have to help you in other ways. Li Yundong chuckled and said, well done, but don't let others know. Su Chan nodded obediently. She asked suspiciously, Yundong, what are you going to do? Li Yundong smiled and said, I have my own way. You can go back first. Don't let others find out that something is wrong. Su Chan giggled and said, I know. Although your girl always causes you trouble sometimes, she is not a fool. Li Yundong laughed and said, well, my girl is the smartest. Hearing Li Yundong's praise, Su Chan was so happy that she beamed with joy. She walked to the door, turned around, and waved her hand. She whispered in a sweet voice, then I'm leaving. Li Yundong smiled and waved at the girl. After the door was closed, the smile on his face faded little by little, and he looked thoughtful. Under the moonlight, Li Yundong's figure was like a boulder, motionless, deep and cold. At dawn the next day, when the people of the Fox Zen school got up, they were surprised to find that Li Yundong was already standing in the living room early in the morning. Li Yundong stood facing the east-facing balcony with his hands behind his back. His feet were in an irregular position, and the balcony curtains and floor-to-ceiling windows were open. The morning breeze outside blew the corners of his clothes, and the golden morning light was sprinkled on his body like a gauze, making him look like a shining golden pagoda, full of mystery and majesty. The little foxes of the Fox Zen school looked at Li Yundong's back and held their breath for a moment. One by one, they looked at their leader with admiration, as if as long as they stood behind him, they would have nothing to worry about, and everything would be peaceful and happy. Zhou Qin and Li Yundong had agreed to embark on the Zhuji phase that day, so they came to the living room early in the morning. Seeing the little foxes in the living room in a daze, she followed their gazes out of curiosity. Zhou Qin was stunned by what she saw. She looked at Li Yundong with infatuation, and her breathing seemed to have stopped. At this time, Li Yundong had slowly lost the sharpness he had when he had just started cultivating. Instead, he was calm and shrewd. In Zhou Qin's opinion, Li Yundong used to be like a dazzling golden sun, which people couldn't look at directly. But now, Li Yundong was like a towering mountain that people looked up to. He's growing up so fast. Zhou Qin sighed slightly in her heart, and there was even a trace of sweetness and joy in her heart. She was not like Su Chan, who had accompanied Li Yundong when he was at his lowest, but she had finally witnessed the boy's slow transformation from immaturity to maturity. In her opinion, nothing could make her happier than watching Li Yundong grow up and mature. This kind of joy even surpassed the joy of her own cultivation. Gradually, more and more people came to the living room. They were all shocked by the different temperament Li Yundong had shown today, and none of them dared to breathe. When everyone had arrived, Li Yundong turned around, nodded slightly, and said in a deep voice, "You must be wondering why I'm posing here so early in the morning." When the little foxes heard Li Yundong's words, they couldn't help but laugh softly. Su Chan and Zi Yuan knew what Li Yundong wanted to say, so they didn't laugh. They just held their breath and waited for Li Yundong to continue. Li Yundong nodded to the crowd and motioned for them to sit down and make themselves at home. He stood in the field and said in a deep voice, "This time, our Fox Zen school has experienced a major event, which is that we have finally opened up our own source of wealth. Desanxian has successfully opened its business, and I believe that after the opening ceremony on the first day, no other sects will dare to strangle our Desanxian. That is to say, from now on, our Fox Zen school will no longer have to rely on others for food and clothing and be afraid." The little foxes were used to Li Yundong's humor and easygoing manner. Suddenly, when they saw Li Yundong speaking with a serious face, they were all a little uncomfortable for a moment. They looked at each other and didn't know whether they should applaud at this time or not. Li Yundong ignored them and continued, in addition to the opening ceremony, there is another event worth celebrating." Li Yundong nodded to Zhou Qin and motioned for her to come to him. He said, "Zhou Qin is about to reach the Zhuji phase. Today, I will solemnly teach her a few powerful magical weapons. I hope everyone can bear witness." As the leader of the sect, Li Yundong had absolute control over the powerful magical weapons in the sect, so there was no objection from the Fox Zen school. The little foxes looked at Zhou Qin eagerly, their eyes full of envy. They all thought to themselves, "This guy is really lucky. She has Rinyuan Jindan and a powerful magical weapon given by the leader. I'm so envious." Li Yundong saw that they were all looking at him eagerly, as if he knew what they were thinking. He smiled slightly and said, "Don't be envious. I promise you that in the future, if there are elixirs and elixirs, you will definitely get them. Moreover, if there are powerful magical weapons, you will definitely get them." When the little foxes heard this, they immediately beamed with joy and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" Li Yundong nodded and raised his hand. The little foxes immediately fell silent and stopped making trouble. Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, saw this and felt a little emotional in her heart. Since Li Yundong took over as the leader of the Fox Zen school, although he has been very loved, the little foxes have always been close to him and lack authority. Therefore, the three Shibua have always been needed to discipline these little foxes. But now, Li Yundong's bearing was enough to subdue these lawless little foxes. At this time, Li Yundong said to Zhou Qin seriously, "Zhou Qin, kneel down. Now, as your master, I will teach you powerful magical weapons. I hope that you can make good use of them after you reach the Zhuji phase." Zhou Qin's face was also full of solemnity. She knelt down respectfully, raised her hands high, and lowered her head slightly. She looked at Li Yundong's shoes and said, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong took out the cold saw-toothed Vajra wheel from the colorful brocade pouch he carried with him and handed it to her, saying, "This is the powerful magical weapon of Yi Yu of the Fox Zen school. Its original name is the cold saw-toothed Vajra wheel. Now I will rename it Chiwa and give it to you. I hope that you can use it to cut off all the thorns and difficulties on the path of cultivation." Zhou Qin took it respectfully and put it aside. At this time, Li Yundong took out a fiery red whip from the brocade pouch and said in a deep voice, "Zhou Qin, take the treasure." Zhou Qin raised her hands again and said respectfully, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong said in a deep voice, "This is the powerful magical weapon of LV Fengping of the Yin-Yang sect of Mount Wuhua. Although I don't know its original name, I will rename it the Vulcan's Whip today. I hope that it can be carried forward in your hands." Zhou Qin took it respectfully and placed the Vulcan's Whip beside her. At this time, Wan Hongling, who had been watching the scene, suddenly whispered to Zi Yuan, "Sister Zi Yuan, today is the first time I've found that Li Yundong is really serious." Zi Yuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. Without turning her head, she replied with a smile, "Was he not serious when he was on Mount Tianlong?" Wan Hongling snorted. "This guy is always smiling all day long. He's not serious at all. I only remember that he teased me. Who would remember something that happened so long ago?" Zi Yuan watched as Li Yundong solemnly handed over the powerful magical weapons to Zhou Qin. Her eyes suddenly became a little blurred, as if she wanted to see through the scene in front of her and see a distant picture in the depths of her memory. She murmured dreamily, "I remember." Li Yundong's voice suddenly became incomparably spacious and leisurely in Zi Yuan's ears, as if it had come from a distant place. This dignified and solemn voice reminded her of her master. It was as if that gentle figure was swaying in front of her eyes, and that gentle voice was flowing in her ears. Just as Zi Yuan was in a daze, Wan Hongling, who was beside her, suddenly stretched out her hand and shook it hard in front of her eyes. She whispered, "Hey, Sister Zi Yuan, what's wrong with you?" Zi Yuan seemed to wake up from a dream. She suddenly came back to her senses. In her eyes, the vague figure in the depths of her memory disappeared, replaced by Li Yundong's figure. There was a strong sense of confusion in Zi Yuan's eyes. She couldn't help comparing her master with the boy in front of her. In her impression, her master was like the clouds and the wind, casual and natural. She had never seen him lose his temper. He was always so calm and natural, and his eyes seemed to see through the world and everything. As for this boy, sometimes he was like fire, and sometimes he was like a mountain. He was dignified and unpredictable. Zi Yuan thought in her heart, and she couldn't help whispering, "They are obviously two completely different people. Why do I always feel that they are so similar?" Wan Hongling, who was standing to one side, sighed in her heart. She knew that it was precisely because her Shiji admired her master so much that she had a deep imprint on her. No matter what, she was imitating her master and chasing after his figure and footprints. Sister Zi Yuan used to have an inexplicable love for master, but now she has obviously fallen in love with this guy, but she refuses to admit it. Alas, I don't know when this layer of paper will be broken. Wan Hongling thought with a sad face. Wan Hongling knew that once Zi Yuan indulged in chasing after her master's footprints again, she would return to the appearance of an otherworldly fairy. It was fine if it was just this appearance, but what if her sister Zi Yuan was like her master and flew away without caring about anything? What would she do? Wouldn't that mean that he was going to be all alone? Wan Hongling didn't want Zi Yuan to become like this, but she didn't have any good ideas, so she said casually, "Sister Zi Yuan, why does Li Yundong have to be the leader of the Fox Zen school? If he sets up his own sect, he might be able to become a great master of his generation." At this time, Zi Yuan became slightly sober. She sighed softly and said, "With Li Yundong's talent, and opportunities, if he sets up his own sect, he will definitely become a great master in the future." A great master? So exaggerated? Although Wan Hongling disagreed in her heart, she didn't refute it. The two of them whispered. At this time, Li Yundong took out the third powerful magical weapon from the brocade pouch. When everyone saw this powerful magical weapon, they immediately exclaimed, "Liuha!" Wan Hongling also opened her mouth wide and whispered, "No way, the Liuha will also be passed on to Zhou Qin? Aren't you afraid that someone will kill you and take the treasure?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and did not say anything. At this time, Li Yundong held the lyoha with both hands and said, "Zhou Qin, take the treasure." Zhou Qin raised her hands again and said, "Master, please give me the treasure." Li Yundong said, "This is the powerful magical weapon of Yan Feng of the Linggong sect of the Zhimi school. Now I will pass it to you. I hope you will make good use of it in the future." Zhou Qin respectfully took the lyoha. At this time, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were so red that their eyes almost turned into rabbit eyes. It was already good enough for ordinary cultivators to have one powerful magical weapon, but Zhou Qin had actually received 3 at once, and each of them was an extremely powerful cultivation magical weapon. Isn't this too exaggerated? Is it so profitable to be Li Yundong's disciple? Li Yundong didn't seem to see the pairs of shining eyes of the little foxes. After passing the magical weapons, he was about to speak when he suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Li Yundong looked up and saw Su Chan very cleverly saying, "I'll go and have a look." As she said this, she trotted to the door, opened it, and took a look. Then she turned to Li Yundong and said loudly, "Yundong, it's a woman. She's looking for you." Li Yundong was stunned for a moment and thought, "A woman? Who? Who knows I live here?" Chapter 429. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong turned around and walked to the door. When he got there, he saw a tall woman in a professional suit standing at the door. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Who are you?" As soon as the woman saw Li Yundong, a bright smile appeared on her face. She said in a deliberately flattering manner, "Child Li, right? I'm an employee of Di Hao. Our manager asked me to deliver something. Go to QuanNet. 7KOM. Only then did Li Yundong understand that he had extorted a sum of money from the woman in Di Hao yesterday. Early this morning, this sucker had come to give him money. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "Forget it. You can take all these things back." The woman's face suddenly changed dramatically. She said in a trembling voice, "Child Li, how can you not want it? Didn't we already agree?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "I can't accept it. You can take it back." The woman was anxious and afraid. She was almost crying. She said in a sobbing tone, "Child Li, don't make things difficult for me. I'm just a small employee. It's not easy for me to make a living. You can't make me lose my job." Li Yundong frowned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Zi Yuan come out and ask softly, "What happened?" When Li Yundong told her what had happened in a low voice, Zi Yuan suddenly laughed. She looked at the woman who was so anxious that she was crying and whispered to Li Yundong, "You went out yesterday and gained a lot. How come I didn't know about this?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I was thinking about other things yesterday, so I forgot to tell you. Besides, it was not a glorious thing, so I was too embarrassed to tell you. I didn't expect that the other party would come to me today." Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, "How could they not come to you? You are so cruel. You robbed them of 500,000 yuan without even asking. TSK, what a great deal. If you open your mouth, Bill Gates will have to beg for food." Li Yundong said with a wry smile, "Come on, don't gloat. Don't make fun of me. What should I do?" Zi Yuan asked curiously, "Take it." "Why not?" Li Yundong was taken aback. "No way," he said. "Did I hear that right? You're actually encouraging me to accept this kind of money?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Have you ever seen a Buddhist refuse any incense money? Do you think these monks don't know that a lot of the money is dirty? Money doesn't matter if it's clean or not, it only depends on who uses it. If you think the money is dirty, then you can use it in a clean place. That will be all right, right? Hee, if all of us cultivators thought like you, we would have starved to death a long time ago." Li Yundong couldn't help but chuckle. He thought for a moment and said readily, "Okay, let's do as you say." When the woman saw Li Yundong and Zi Yuan whispering to each other, she stretched her neck to listen. However, she could only hear a few vague words, such as cultivators, incense money, and so on. She was confused by what she heard. When Li Yundong turned around, the woman immediately looked at him eagerly. As long as Li Yundong said the word no, she would immediately use her ability to cry, make a scene, and hang herself. Anyway, she would not go back until she completed the task. Li Yundong saw that the woman had put on a posture of long-term resistance, and he was also happy in his heart. He smiled and said, okay, I'll accept it. Don't pretend like I'm bullying good people. The woman immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said with an apologetic smile, Child Li, you are so magnanimous. I really admire you. Hearing this, Li Yundong shook his head secretly. What kind of world is this? The one who gives money is still a grandson, but the one who receives it is a master. Alas, this world is really F***king, touching. Li Yundong turned to Zi Yuan and said, since you agree to accept the money, you can deal with this matter. I'll go in first. Zi Yuan glared at Li Yundong angrily and said, you want me to clean up your mess for you? You're so shameless. Li Yundong was stunned. He subconsciously looked at Zi Yuan's hand and asked, which hand will help me clean up? Zi Yuan was very embarrassed. She glared at Li Yundong and then walked to her residence opposite. Without looking back, she said to the beauty who had given her money, come with me. After Li Yundong finished speaking, he also felt that what he had said was a little inappropriate. He smiled dryly and walked into the room. When he calmed down, he continued to say to Zhou Qin, I'm going to walk all the way to the Himalayas and carry out the Zhuji phase on the snowy mountain. Can you persist on this difficult and long journey? In Li Yundong's opinion, although Zhou Qin had a determined personality, she was from a wealthy family after all, and she loved cleanliness very much. It was really difficult for her to go to Tibet alone and eat in the wind and sleep in the open like he did. Zhou Qin seemed to know Li Yundong's concerns. She smiled slightly and said, Master, I heard that when Zi Yuan was in the Zhuji phase, she begged alms along the way for more than 2,000 miles, and finally reached the destination to carry out the Zhuji phase. I think I can do what she can do. Li Yundong's eyes were full of admiration. He nodded and said, well, take these powerful magical weapons with you. Don't show them to others. Zhou Qin nodded seriously and solemnly held the powerful magical weapons in her hands. Li Yundong said to her, go and pack up now. We'll set off in a while. Zhou Qin nodded and was about to enter the room when she heard the doorbell ring. The little girl was clever and immediately jumped to the door. She opened the door and stuck her head out to take a look. She was immediately startled and ran back to Li Yundong's side. She whispered in his ear, Yundong, there are 2 policemen at the door. Are they looking for you? Li Yundong's eyes narrowed, and he secretly nodded at Su Chan's cleverness. He thought to himself, in the past, this little girl would definitely shout and shout. Now, this little girl has also grown up. Li Yundong walked to the door and saw 2 policemen standing there. They were the 2 policemen he had met last night. As soon as he went out, the 2 policemen immediately saluted him. Xiao Zhang, the policeman who had been clamoring to arrest Li Yundong, said with an apologetic smile, Child Li, we meet again. Li Yundong looked him up and down and asked curiously, why are you here? The smile on Xiao Zhang's face suddenly froze, and he didn't know what to say. He wanted to say something soft, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he really didn't know how to say them. Xiao Lu, the policeman next to him, was more clever. He quickly handed over a sealed bag in his hand and said with a smile, Child Li, this is what Director Gong asked us to send. Li Yundong took the sealed bag calmly and said casually, did Director Gong ask you to come? Xiao Zhang suddenly cursed in his heart, nonsense, if it weren't for the director asking me to come, I wouldn't have to look at you like this. You just have a great father. What are you so proud of? Xiao Zhang's face was ugly, but the smile on Xiao Lu's face became more and more brilliant. He said with a smile, "Child Li's guess is really accurate. It was really Director Gong who asked us to come. He said that we offended Child Li last night, and today we have to apologize to you." Li Yundong smiled slightly, glanced at them, and said, "In the future, law enforcement should be more humane. The power given to you by the people is not for you to show off." Xiao Lu quickly nodded and said with a smile, "Child Li is right. You are right to teach us a lesson." Seeing that his companion's face had darkened, he quickly nudged him with his elbow. Xiao Zhang forced out a smile and said dryly, "Yes, yes, young Master Li said it well." Li Yundong saw that his smile was uglier than crying, and Xiao Lu beside him was even more embarrassed. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He didn't want to embarrass the two of them anymore, so he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, you can go. I still have something to do, so I won't greet you anymore." Xiao Lu quickly smiled and said, "Child Li, you are busy. I won't disturb you." After that, he dragged his companion next to him to salute, and then watched Li Yundong turn around and enter the room. Only then did they dare to turn around and leave. After leaving the community, Xiao Zhang spat and said angrily, "How old are you? You haven't even grown a few hairs on your head, yet you are already teaching people like an old man. Who do you think you are?" However, Xiao Lu shook his head and said, "Although this man is young, his bearing is really not small. It's not like you didn't see his background last night. Even Director Gong was polite to him. If he wanted to kill us, wouldn't it be as easy as crushing an ant? But how did you see him talk? What is broad-mindedness? This is broad-mindedness." Xiao Zhang sneered and said, "Humph, if I had powerful parents, I would also have broad-mindedness." Hearing this, Xiao Lu couldn't help but sigh, "Alas, you hate your father for not being strong." The two of them talked all the way out of the community, but Li Yundong didn't know what they were talking about behind his back. He held the sealed bag in his hand and thought about what the two policemen had said and their attitudes just now. He suddenly felt a little emotional. At this moment, Li Yundong completely understood why all sects had worked hard to get close to the royal power since ancient times. Emperor Wu of the Northern Wei dynasty had put Ko Qianji in an important position, so the Northern Heavenly Master Taoism had risen. During the Song dynasty, Emperor Huizong of Song believed in Mount Longhu, so the Zhengyi school had unified the world. Genghis Khan and Kublai had admired Qiu Chuji, so the Chuanjin sect had become famous all over the world. When the sect and the secular power merged into one, the energy it produced would be huge and immeasurable. In the past, if he had encountered such a thing, he would definitely have suffered a great loss. But now, even the director of the Public Security Bureau was smiling at him, and the arrogant policeman had become subservient. Where did all this come from? Li Yundong knew very well that all this came from Zhou Qin's family power and background, but why did Zhou Qin favor him? It was cultivation. It was the transcendental power that cultivation brought to him that attracted her. It's good to cultivate in Six Fan School. Li Yundong held the sealed bag in his hand and suddenly sighed softly in his heart. He shook his head and threw this little episode out of his mind. He opened the sealed bag and took out the document inside. After glancing at it, he immediately frowned slightly, and a sharp light shot out of his eyes, as if he was lost in thought. It wasn't until Li Yundong came back to his senses that he found Su Chan and the others looking at him. He didn't even dare to breathe. Seeing that Li Yundong wasn't thinking at this time, Su Chan boldly asked, "Yundong, what's wrong with you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nothing." As he said this, he whispered to Su Chan, "Come to the room with me. Well, let's talk to the children. I'll go back to Suzhou on the 10th. I'll break out after I go back. It's really hard to write in Shenzhen. In addition, thank you to the children who voted for PK and VIP tickets. Tang Tang, I thank you very much. I wish you all good luck in the year of the rabbit, and all of you can cultivate to the Yangshan phase. Chapter 430. Go to watch net. Su Chan rolled her eyes. Although she was puzzled, she still answered obediently and followed Li Yundong into the room. Go to watch net. Li Yundong entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. He gently patted his palm with the sealed bag in his right hand. He didn't speak to Su Chan, just had a serious look on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Although Su Chan was used to playing with Li Yundong, she didn't dare to play with him when she saw his frown and gloomy face. She just stood aside obediently and didn't make a sound to disturb him. After a while, Su Chan felt that the atmosphere in the room was so heavy that the air was about to freeze. She almost wanted to shout. At this time, Li Yundong said, "Chaner, let me ask you again. Are you sure about what you told me before?" Su Chan nodded vigorously. "Yes, of course." Li Yundong was silent. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. Seeing his worried face, Su Chan asked cautiously, "Yundong, don't be like this. I'm very worried. I still like you when you laugh cheerfully." Li Yundong shook his head, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "When I think that one of the 3 seniors of our Fox Zen school is a traitor, and that I have to find her and kill her with my own hands, I can't smile anymore." Su Chan was shocked in her heart, but she didn't show it. Instead, she took Li Yundong's arm and said softly, "Yundong, don't think too much. If you have any troubles and need my help, just tell me. I can also share your burden. I was very sad that you didn't tell me these things before." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "What are you sad about?" Su Chan pouted and said with a wronged expression, "Of course, you told Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan, but you didn't tell me. It's unfair. I was smart enough to find some clues." "Humph. I know, you just think that I'm stupid, can't control my words, and often cause trouble for you. I'm just a hindrance. But I'm trying hard to change." Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's eyes were filled with tears as she spoke, and his heart was filled with tenderness. He took the little girl's hand, gently held her hand, and said softly, "Silly girl, do you know what I like most about you?" The little girl wiped her tears and thought for a moment. She rolled her eyes and deliberately said foolishly, "Do you like me because I'm beautiful?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Idiot, look at all the women in this room. Which one of them isn't beautiful? Isn't Zhou Qin pretty? Isn't Zi Yuan beautiful? But why do I like you and not them?" Hearing this, Su Chan was secretly happy. She felt sweet in her heart, as if she had eaten honey. She smiled and said, "What do you like about girls? It can't be that you like me being mischievous, right?" Li Yundong chuckled, pinched the tip of the little girl's nose with his hand, and said softly, "I just like your cuteness and purity. I like your innocence." We agreed that after we finished cultivation, we would fly together and travel all over the country. Do you still remember? Hearing this, Su Chan was fascinated. She suddenly remembered the days when she and Li Yundong had just met. Her smile suddenly became very warm and gentle. "Of course I remember. At that time, although the 2 of us lived a hard life, we really felt very happy at that time." Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed and said, "Yes, now I am the master of the Fox Zen school, the leader of a sect. We have also established our own foundation, but in the process, we have to be careful every step of the way. Now our situation seems peaceful, but in fact, I feel that every step I take is like walking on thin ice. Moreover, at present, the internal and external troubles of the Fox Zen school are a thorn in my heart. I am worried about it myself. How can I bear to let you worry about this kind of thing?" As he spoke, Li Yundong stroked the little girl's cheek lovingly and said softly, "What do you think will happen if my little girl loses her smile and happiness because of these things?" Su Chan was moved when she heard this. She held Li Yundong's hand tightly and said, "Even if I become like that, you can't abandon me. You can't abandon me." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Silly girl, don't talk nonsense. I will make you happy forever. Besides, I will not leave you, no matter what you become. Su Chan's heart was overflowing with tenderness when she heard this. She leaned softly into his arms, raised her face, and looked at her lover with infatuation and love in her eyes. She said naively, Yundong, kiss me. Li Yundong held the little girl's beautiful and charming face and gently pecked her rosy, pink lips. Although their lips and teeth separated as soon as they touched, they both felt that the taste was bone-piercing and made their hearts beat faster. Both Li Yundong and Su Chan knew that it was not the time for them to be intimate, so they separated and looked at each other and smiled. They felt that although the kiss was shallow, the sweetness in their hearts went deep into their hearts. It was as if this moment would last forever, and this moment would last until the end of time. Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms. After a while, he patted her on the shoulder and said softly, well, Chaner, help me call Chao Yi Sherbua here. Su Chan straightened up and said softly, Yundong, why do you want to call Chao Yi Sherbua? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, don't you want to help me share some things? I'm asking for your help. Su Chan blinked. What do you want me to do for you? Li Yundong waved at Su Chan and motioned for her to come over. Then, he whispered a few words in her ear. When Su Chan heard this, she was slightly shocked. What are you going to do? Yundong, can you be sure? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, now the situation of our Fox Zen school is like hiding a snake in the grass. We know that there is a snake, but we don't know where it is. Therefore, if we keep waiting for the snake to appear on its own, the only result will be that the innocent people around us will be hurt. For example, President Chao. I still don't understand why she was attacked. Su Chan said thoughtfully, then Yundong, have you decided to? Li Yundong nodded and said, yes, I want to alert the snake. Su Chan nodded and said, I understand. I'll call Chao Yi Sherbua in later. As she spoke, she looked at Li Yundong with some worry and said, Yundong, you have to pay attention to your own safety. Be careful. At this point, the little girl suddenly swallowed the rest of her words, as if she felt that she was being a little paranoid. Li Yundong smiled and said, don't worry about me. I'm fine. You can go now. Su Chan went out of the door, walked over to Chao Yi, and whispered a few words to her. Chao Yi was stunned, and a strange look appeared on her face. However, she still smiled at Su Chan, then went upstairs and entered Li Yundong's room. The little foxes of the Fox Zen school did not notice this situation. In their opinion, it was normal for the leader to talk to their Sherbua. They were still talking and laughing. Su Chan saw that they were not paying attention, so she quietly flashed into Chao Yi's room. After entering the room, Su Chan twitched her nose slightly and kept searching for the smell of blood she had smelled before. Her sense of smell was extremely sensitive. After sniffing a few times in the room, she smelled a faint smell of blood in the air. The little girl's spirit was lifted, and she immediately followed the smell. Sure enough, in a hidden corner at the foot of the bed, she found a small package tightly wrapped in a plastic bag. Su Chan opened it and saw that it was the Taoist robe that Chao Yi had worn before. Su Chan nodded secretly, hid the package in her arms, and then quietly jumped out from behind the balcony of the room. The little girl jumped onto the balcony of Li Yundong's room and hid outside with her breath held. When Li Yundong coughed in the room, he said in a deep voice, little girl, don't hide. Come in. Su Chan gently pushed open the balcony and said with a smile, Yundong, you are so powerful now. You can even detect my hidden aura. Li Yundong smiled and pointed outside the balcony, saying, if you want to hide, how many people in the world can detect you? It was your shadow that betrayed you. Su Chan looked back and saw that the sunlight outside had cast a long oblique shadow on her figure. The little girl patted her head and said with some chagrin, so that's how it is. Li Yundong smiled slightly and asked, have you found it? Su Chan took out a package from her arms. Li Yundong took it and opened it. It was the Taoist robe that Chao Yi usually wore. Li Yundong looked carefully and saw a faint bloodstain on the cuffs and ribs of the Taoist robe. Li Yundong nodded to himself. His face was as calm as water, and he didn't say a word. The little girl next to him asked tentatively, Yundong, what are you thinking? Is Chao Yi Shibo really the traitor? Li Yundong was silent for a long time. He sighed softly and said noncommittally, I think I already know who the traitor is. Su Chan immediately asked curiously, is it Chao Yi Shibo? Li Yundong glanced at her, touched her soft black hair, and said softly, don't ask about these things. You shouldn't get involved in these intrigues. You have done what you can. Leave the rest to me. I will drive the snake out of our Fox Zen school. Su Chan curled up her lips and said reluctantly, but I'm always worried. You should at least tell me some plans. It's not a big deal if I make a fool of myself, but if I ruin your plan, it will be a big deal. When Li Yundong heard this, he also felt that Su Chan's words made sense. Moreover, at this time, it was time to reveal the dagger, so there was no need to hide it anymore. He thought for a moment, then said to Su Chan with a smile, do you know why Zhou Qin wants to go to the Zhuji phase at this time? Su Chan blinked her eyes in confusion. Isn't it because her cultivation has already reached the required level? Li Yundong shook his head. She can go tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Why is she in such a hurry to go today? Su Chan was a very smart woman. After being pointed out by Li Yundong, she immediately thought of what had happened to Chao Kefi before. Her eyes lit up and she let out a soft cry. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Chaner, do you think Yan Fang will choose to continue to find a way to kill Chao Kefi or take back the Liuha sword that Zhou Qin is carrying? Vote recommendation previous page return to table of contents next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your opinion. Chapter 431. Go to watch net. After hearing Li Yundong's words, Su Chan couldn't help but be full of doubts for a while. She asked in confusion, if it were me, of course, I would go and grab the Liuha. Isn't my personal magical item more important? The Liuha is so powerful, why don't you go and grab it? Li Yundong nodded slightly. I think so too, so I asked Zhou Qin to carry the Liuha and set off now to lure the snake out of its hole. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Su Chan suddenly asked, but I don't understand. Why does Shibo Yan Fang want to kill Chao Kefi? At this time, Li Yundong's face darkened slightly. He said, we will have the answer soon. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong's confident and deep face and suddenly felt a little worried. But out of absolute trust in Li Yundong, she buried the worry in her heart. The little girl couldn't figure it out. As a great cultivator of the Linggong sect, it was fine that Yan Fang made things difficult for the Fox Zen school, but why did she make things difficult for Chao Kefi, a weak girl who had no strength to truss a chicken? Moreover, every time she saw Chao Kefi, she always felt a sense of intimacy, as if she knew her. It's strange. The little girl pouted slightly, tilted her head, and murmured, it seems that I'm not the only one who has this feeling. Are all the Shirbas the same? Just as the little girl was puzzled, Zhou Qin had already packed up her luggage and embarked on the long and dangerous road of Zhuji phase. Zhou Qin walked to the door with her luggage on her back. She turned around and saw that the little foxes in the living room were all looking at her eagerly, their eyes full of envy. Li Yundong stood on the stairs of the second floor, standing like a pine tree and looking at her. In Zhou Qin's eyes, this young and handsome boy already had the bearing of a master. He stood on a high place and looked at her like a dignified elder, watching the younger generation go out on a long journey. Zhou Qin fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She hesitated for a moment, then said softly, Master, I'm leaving. Li Yundong looked at his classmate, this beautiful apprentice who had an ambiguous relationship with him, with a complicated look in his eyes. A month or two ago, he had embarked on the journey of Zhuji phase. He was well aware of the difficulties and dangers involved. But soon, his first apprentice would embark on the dangerous journey he had experienced and go to the Himalayas to Zhuji phase. Half a year ago, she was just a rich young lady with a silver spoon in her mouth. Would she be able to withstand the test of a journey of more than 2,000 kilometers? Zhou Qin seemed to understand Li Yundong's worried gaze. She was a little nervous, but she suddenly smiled and said, "Master, don't worry. I will definitely come back safely. What you can do, I can also do. I won't embarrass you." The worry in Li Yundong's heart was diluted by her words. He smiled slightly and nodded to her. "Then I won't see you off." Zhou Qin nodded, turned around, and walked out of the door, leaving only the people of the Fox Zen school in the room sighing. Zhuji phase was the most important threshold for cultivators, and there were countless variables. Even those who had cultivated the destiny connection could not predict what would happen to a person on the road to Zhuji phase. Since ancient times, there had been countless geniuses who had fallen on the road of Zhuji phase. No one knew if Zhou Qin would be the next one. Su Chan pulled Li Yundong's arm and whispered, "Yundong, do you think Sister Zhou Qin can smoothly reach the Zhuji phase? Isn't it a little difficult for her to go to such a dangerous place on her first Zhuji phase?" Li Yundong sighed softly and said, "The fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Zhou Qin is proud and arrogant. A person like her is not suitable to be cultivated in a warm room. She should face the cruelest and most dangerous challenges in the world. Only in this way can she complete her transformation and become a great cultivator. I believe that she can get through this challenge, and I also believe that she can defeat herself." While Li Yundong and Su Chan were talking, Zhou Qin had already left the community and was trotting along the road, heading straight in the direction of Tibet. It was winter at this time. Although Tiannan City was a southern city, because of the cold current, most of the citizens of Tiannan City had already put on winter clothes, and they all looked a little bloated. However, only Zhou Qin was wearing a single shirt and pants. Her long hair, which had originally been draped over her shoulders, was also tied up high, revealing a large snow-white neck. This young lady was carrying a cloth bag on her back, which contained a few changes of clothes. In the cloth bag, there was a long sword wrapped in black cloth. In her pocket, there was 1,000 yuan. Other than that, there was nothing else. Zhou Qin trotted all the way with her bag on her back. Her beautiful face and strange attire attracted the attention of countless passers-by. People were guessing where this beautiful woman, who seemed to be going on a long journey, was going. At first, there was a man who was shocked by Zhou Qin's appearance. Some men wanted to follow Zhou Qin and conspire against her. However, Zhou Qin was a virgin Xianin cauldron, a good cultivation cauldron that was 1 in a million. Moreover, she had the help of the Renyuan Jin Dan. Ever since the Renyuan Jin Dan had transformed her body, her physical strength was not inferior to Li Yundong's. In addition, she had Li Yundong's careful guidance, which had helped her open up the 8 extra meridians of her body. At this time, when she ran, she was like a small sports car with full horsepower. She ran for more than 10 kilometers, but she did not feel tired at all. At first, the few men who could follow behind her only followed her for more than 10 minutes. Their faces were full of shock as they watched Zhou Qin's back disappear into the dust. Zhou Qin ran all the way out of Tiannan City, and then slowly slowed down. Just like Li Yundong's Zhuji phase, she stood at the edge of the city, looked back at the bustling metropolis, and then looked at the road in front of her, which was already a desolate suburb. Suddenly, Zhou Qin felt an inexplicable emotion and melancholy in her heart. For the first time, she experienced the state of mind and feelings that Li Yundong had felt when he was in the Zhuji phase. On an uncertain journey, in the vast world, she had no one to rely on. When she looked up, she saw the sky. When she bent down, there was only mud. How small a person was. And cultivators were embarking on such a dangerous path, trying to conquer heaven and earth, trying to surpass life and death. What kind of lofty sentiments and lofty aspirations did this require? What kind of courage and boldness did it require? When she went to Tibet to cultivate, at least she had her own family backing her up and Li Yundong, a powerful master, supporting her. But at that time, Li Yundong had no one to rely on, and the only person close to him, Su Chan, had been forced to separate from him. How did he overcome this kind of lovesickness? How did he overcome the dangers of heaven and earth, and successfully build the Zhuji phase? The further Zhou Qin went on the road of cultivation, the more she admired Li Yundong. There were some things that she could only know the horror and difficulty of after she had experienced them herself. Zhou Qin stood by the side of the road and looked at Tiannan City. From time to time, there were speeding cars passing by. Some of them even stopped by the side of the road and asked Zhou Qin loudly if she needed a ride. But Zhou Qin turned a deaf ear to them. She just looked at the city she was familiar with blurred eyes, and then walked away from the bustling world step by step. Zhou Qin followed Li Yundong's footsteps all the way west. Before she knew it, it was already night. At this time, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Zhou Qin had already gotten off the highway and entered a barren forest that she couldn't name. She found a remote place and tidied up the surrounding environment a little. Then, she sat down cross-legged and prepared to start qi. But as soon as she entered meditation, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine, and her hair stood on end. There seemed to be a pair of eyes staring at her in the dark. Zhou Qin suddenly opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were bright and clear. She said in a clear voice, "Come out, who is it?" In this quiet night, Zhou Qin's voice was sent far away. For a moment, the birds and insects were shocked. There was a dead silence all around, and there was no response. Zhou Qin's eyes swept across the dark night. She snorted and took out the lyoha from her bag. She sneered and said, "Still not coming out? Do you want to force me to release my powerful magical weapon? This magic weapon of mine was personally passed down to me by my master. I don't need to activate it to slay demons and subdue devils. Once I release it, it won't return to its sheath without seeing blood. I advise you to show yourself to avoid any misunderstandings." As soon as she finished speaking, she saw the figure of a woman appear faintly in the dark night. The woman was graceful, and the corners of her clothes were fluttering, making her look a little elegant and ethereal. Zhou Qin glanced at her with the help of the moonlight and saw that the woman was extremely beautiful. Her eyes were sharp as if they were real. When she looked at her, Zhou Qin's heart shook and her eyes hurt slightly. Zhou Qin was shocked. She knew that the cultivator in front of her must be a powerful character. At least, her cultivation and kung fu were not inferior to Li Yundong's. Zhou Qin frowned and asked, "Who are you? Why are you following me in the middle of the night?" The woman didn't look at Zhou Qin. She just looked at the lyoha in her hand. After a long time, she sneered and said, "You said that this sword was passed down to you by your master?" Zhou Qin said in a deep voice, "That's right." The woman raised her head and laughed. "Do you know that this sword was passed down to me by my master?" Zhou Qin's expression froze. "Are you Yan Feng?" Yan Feng smiled coldly. "Your reaction is fast. Humph, that little bastard Li Yundong actually dared to let you carry the lyoha in the street? He really thinks too highly of you." Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She just held the sword in her hand and slowly pulled it out. The blade of the lyoha rubbed against the scabbard, making a clanging sound, and it was full of murderous intent. When Zhou Qin completely pulled the sword out of the scabbard, the lyoha let out a series of buzzing sounds, eager to have a try. It jumped into the air and pointed the sword at Yan Feng. Zhou Qin said coldly, "Yan Feng, I know that you are also a pitiful person. You have hidden your identity for 9 years in order to take revenge. Now that Ao Wushuang has been sealed by you and Lu Yi has been killed by you, the Fox Zen School is now beyond recognition. What else can you not let go of? As the saying goes, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. The sea of bitterness is boundless, so repent and you will be saved. It has not been easy for you to cultivate for so many years. Don't be blinded by hatred and lose your cultivation overnight. Yan Fang laughed out loud. Li Yundong is a sharp-tongued guy. I didn't expect that his disciple would also be the master of a battle of words. The two of you, master and disciple, are well matched. Yan Fang laughed for a while. Suddenly, her face became serious, and her eyes were full of killing intent. She said ferociously, Zhou Qin, don't think that you can talk to me with a straight back just because your background is strong enough. Let me tell you, you are now a cultivator. If I kill you, I won't be punished by heaven. Moreover, this powerful magical weapon was originally mine. Your master had the cheek to take it for himself. Today, I am just returning it to its original owner. Zhou Qin retorted sarcastically without showing any weakness. The magical weapons in the world belong to those who can. You can't protect your Dharma artifact, yet you say such sour words. Can you even be considered a cultivator? Yan Fang couldn't help but be furious. She shouted, the magical weapons in the world belong to those who can. Then I'll take them back today. Chapter 432. Go to watch net. Yan Fang quickly pinched her fingers and threw out 2 talismans. These 2 talismans flew in the air and burned by themselves. Then the flames of the 2 talismans continued to grow, and 2 golden people quickly emerged from the flames. Go to watch net. Zhou Qin saw that these 2 people were covered in golden armor. One was holding a steel whip, and the other was holding an iron tower. They looked dignified and awe-inspiring, like gods who had descended to the world. This was the first time in her life that she had fought with others. Zhou Qin couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Yan Fang was such a character that she immediately noticed the fleeting uneasiness in Zhou Qin's heart. She laughed and said, "Are you afraid now? Humph, do you think I can't do anything to you just because you have the Lioha in your hand? Even a good powerful magical weapon depends on the person using it. If the Lioha falls into your hands, you can only exert 30% of its power at best. You'd better surrender obediently, and I'll spare your life. I'm going to take this Lioha." Zhou Qin pinched her arm hard with her fingers. She took a deep breath and gradually calmed her pounding heart. With a shake of her arm, she shook off the bundle behind her. She grabbed the Chiwe in one hand and the Vulcan's whip in the other. Her sharp eyes pierced through the 2 golden armored warriors and stared at Yan Fang. Seeing her like this, Yan Fang couldn't help sneering and saying, "You really won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. You haven't even reached the Zhuji phase, and you don't have any spiritual power at all. If you were to use this chainsaw Vajra wheel, it would be a powerful magical weapon, but if you use it now, be careful not to hurt yourself." Zhou Qin didn't talk nonsense with her. She shouted loudly, holding the Vulcan's whip like a halberd. She pointed at Yan Fang and shouted, "Lioha, eliminate evil." The sword was psychic, and it had been ordered by Li Yundong to protect Zhou Qin. Therefore, as soon as Zhou Qin gave the order, the Lioha buzzed with a dragon roar and instantly split into 2 long swords. They turned into 2 beams of white light and rushed toward the 2 golden-armored warriors like lightning. The 2 golden-armored warriors also shouted at the same time. One waved the steel whip in his hand and fought with one of the Lioha swords. The other shook his arm, and the iron tower in his hand rose high. Then, in an instant, it covered all the Lioha swords that were pouncing on him. The golden-armored warrior holding the tower quickly pinched his fingers and muttered something, as if he was reciting a spell. Soon, there was a burst of red light in the iron tower, as if there were flames refining the Lioha. The Lioha was shrouded by the iron tower. Like a dragon caught in a net, it struggled wildly and made a series of rumbling sounds. The earth trembled, and from a distance, one could see a steady stream of red light emerging from the foot of the mountain. When Yan Fang saw that one of the two Liuhe was entangled and the other was trapped, she immediately laughed complacently and said, "Zhou Qin, are you still not going to surrender?" But as soon as she finished speaking, she heard a whooshing sound in front of her. Yan Fang took a closer look and saw that it was the cold and beautiful chainsaw Vajra wheel making an ear-piercing, sharp sound of breaking through the air, quickly chopping towards her. Zhou Qin followed closely behind. With a shake of her arm, the Vulcan's whip in her hand rushed straight toward her face. Yan Fang was furious. She had never thought that Zhou Qin, a woman who had not yet reached the Zhuji phase, would dare to take the initiative to attack her. He simply didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Without thinking, Yan Fang grabbed the spinning Chiwe with one hand and accurately caught it in her hand. With 2 fingers of her other hand, she clamped the tip of the Vulcan's whip between her fingers. Yan Fang knew that Zhou Qin had not yet reached the Zhuji phase at this time. Although these 2 powerful magical weapons were powerful, they were no different from ordinary weapons at this time. That was why she dared to catch them with her bare hands. As soon as she caught them, she couldn't help feeling proud in her heart. She thought to herself, "Let's see what else you can do." As soon as this thought came to Yan Fang's mind, she saw Zhou Qin suddenly let go of the Vulcan's whip in her hand. With a stomp of her feet, she rushed to her like a cannonball and fiercely stabbed her eyes with 2 fingers. Yan Fang was shocked and angry. She hadn't expected that Zhou Qin would be so fierce that she would dare to fight hand-to-hand with her. What she didn't know was that Zhou Qin had seen Li Yundong fight hand-to-hand with others several times. That was why she was shocked by Li Yundong's amazing skills and developed a strong curiosity about him. That was why she slowly fell in love with this boy. As the saying goes, like teacher, like disciple. Li Yundong was a cultivator who was very good at hand-to-hand combat. He had defeated the strong several times and turned defeat into victory by relying on his indomitable hand-to-hand combat skills. As Li Yundong's eldest direct disciple, Zhou Qin naturally inherited Li Yundong's fierce style. Moreover, she was resolute and courageous. She didn't make a move, but when she did, she immediately used a cruel and fierce killing move. Li Yundong knew that Zhou Qin was going to go on a long journey. He was afraid that Zhou Qin would run into people with bad intentions along the way, so before leaving, he specially taught her some self-defense skills. The most vulnerable part of a person's body was not the genitals, nor the temples, but the eyes. Cultivators could cultivate their bodies to become extremely strong through cultivation. Although they didn't dare to say that they were invulnerable to bullets, water and fire, their ability to resist attacks could far exceed that of ordinary people. However, no matter how powerful a person was, it was impossible for him to cultivate all his magic to a pair of eyes. People who had undergone special training were able to withstand the blows of iron hammers and even the slashes of steel knives. However, their eyes were extremely fragile. If a child used a little strength to poke their eyes, they would still be blind. Zhou Qin's move was to attack the enemy's death gate. It could be said that it was vicious. Although Yan Fang was an experienced cultivator, she was also shocked by Zhou Qin's cruelty. She immediately let go of the hand holding the tip of the Vulcan's whip and put her palm upright in front of her face. Her palm happened to be stuck between Zhou Qin's fingers, blocking her fingers from stabbing her eyes. Yan Fang hated Zhou Qin for being so vicious. Her other hand, which was holding the chakram, immediately swiped at Zhou Qin's waist and abdomen. As long as the sharp edge of the chakram grazed the chakram, Zhou Qin would immediately be cut open. But when Zhou Qin saw that Yan Fang was going straight to her waist and abdomen, she gritted her teeth and didn't dodge. Then, she punched Yan Fang's heart again. This punch condensed almost all of Zhou Qin's strength. With a whoosh, it made a faint sound of breaking through the air. In an instant, Yan Fang even had an illusion that the power of this punch was like a cannonball fired from a cannon. As long as her chest was hit, even though she had a yang spirit body, she would be blown to pieces. At this time, Yan Fang couldn't help but be shocked. She knew that Zhou Qin was simply fighting with all her might, exchanging her life for her life. Although her Yang's spirit would be destroyed, it could be reshaped by her soul consciousness. Although her cultivation would be greatly reduced, she would not die. However, Zhou Qin had not yet reached the Zhuji phase. If her physical body was destroyed, she would die. Killing 10,000 enemies at the expense of 3,000 oneself was not worth the loss. However, Zhou Qin was killing 3,000 enemies at the expense of 10,000 oneself. Yan Fang was shocked and thought to herself, is this guy crazy? Yan Fang was shocked and hesitated a little. When the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand touched Zhou Qin's waist and abdomen, it was a little slower. With this delay, Zhou Qin's fist had already hit Yan Fang's heart. Yan Fang's body shook violently, and she quickly took a step back, reducing the power of Zhou Qin's fist by more than half. However, the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand also retreated. The sharp blade brushed past the white and smooth skin between her waist and abdomen, and the cold saber chi pierced Zhou Qin's skin and made her hair stand on end. Zhou Qin had just escaped from the gates of hell, but she did not feel afraid at all. Instead, she turned her body and caught the tip of the Vulcan's whip that Yan Fang had thrown down with one hand. With the other hand, she turned her palm and her 5 fingers were like knives, fiercely stabbing Yan Fang's genitals. The genitals were the most important and weakest part of the human body. Cultivators wanted to refine essence into qi, and the source of all qi was from the Huiyin acupoint. If Zhou Qin, who had been reconstructed by Jin Dan, were to use this mercilessly, it would be no different from being stabbed by a steel knife. From then on, the leakless body would become the 5 leakless body, and even if she didn't die, she would become a cripple. Yan Fang was furious. She immediately flew up and kicked Zhou Qin's back. If this kick landed, Zhou Qin's spine would immediately be shattered, and she would be paralyzed in bed from then on, unable to move anymore. Zhou Qin heard the wind behind her. Without thinking about it, she still didn't dodge. Instead, the hand that was stabbing into Yan Fang's genitals moved a little faster. Seeing that Zhou Qin was going to perish together with her, Yan Fang was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She had no choice but to withdraw her foot in the middle of the fight. The chakram in her hand chopped down at Zhou Qin's arm like an axe. At this time, Zhou Qin suddenly turned over and threw out the Vulcan's whip in her hand. The whip wrapped around Yan Fang's chiwe. She pulled it hard with her hand and shouted, "Let go." At the same time, she quickly turned over and stabbed Yan Fang's eyes with her fingers like a halberd. Yan Fang only felt a huge force coming from her hand, followed by Zhou Qin's loud shout. She immediately sneered and thought, "You want to compete with me in strength? You want me to let go?" But as soon as she exerted her strength to take back the sawtooth Vajra wheel, she saw Zhou Qin turn around and stab her eyes with her fingers. Yan Fang was suddenly shocked and angry. She knew that she had fallen into the opponent's trick of diversion. Zhou Qin shouted to let go, as if she wanted to snatch the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand, but in fact, she wanted to use this as a cover to continue to blind her eyes. Yan Fang saw that Zhou Qin's every move was aimed at the vital parts of the human body. Every move was dangerous and vicious, extremely ferocious and ferocious. It didn't look like a move that a woman who had just started to cultivate could make. Yan Fang was shocked. She was shocked by Zhou Qin's fierce attack, and also shocked by Zhou Qin's desperate fighting style. She had dozens of magic arts that could easily kill Zhou Qin, but because of a moment of carelessness, she was actually at a disadvantage in close combat with Zhou Qin. Yan Fang couldn't help but feel hatred in her heart. She glanced at the Liuhe with hatred and thought, when I had the Liuhe in my hand, I suppressed all the heroes on Mount Gazao alone. How powerful I was. Who would have thought that he would be beaten back by a little girl's chaotic punches? But Yan Fang was, after all, an experienced cultivator. She made a prompt decision and immediately threw down the sawtooth Vajra wheel in her hand. With a stomp of her feet, her body floated more than 20 meters away in an instant. Although Zhou Qin was fierce, she had not reached the Zhuji phase after all, and her cultivation kung fu had not reached a higher level. Close combat was a dangerous fight. Whoever could fight harder would have a greater chance of winning. This was the saying, an inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. But Yan Fang decisively gave up the magical item in her hand. In an instant, her body floated more than 20 meters away, and the distance between her and Zhou Qin was widened. Zhou Qin wanted to chase after her again, but she didn't have such a good opportunity as before. This distance of 20 meters was like a chasm between Zhou Qin and Yan Fang. No matter how fast Zhou Qin rushed over, no matter what fierce and desperate moves she used, Yan Fang could calmly kill Zhou Qin with her own magic. This was also the saying, an inch longer, an inch stronger. After Yan Fang left the battlefield, she looked at Zhou Qin in surprise and doubt. Finally, there was no contempt on her face. She knew that Zhou Qin's cultivation talent was outstanding, but she hadn't expected that a rich young lady like Zhou Qin, who had been raised in luxury, would be so fierce and desperate when fighting with others. Even the bearded man was not as good as her. At this time, Yan Fang had vaguely regarded Zhou Qin as an extremely difficult enemy to deal with, and no longer regarded her as a rookie who had not yet reached the Zhuji phase. Yan Fang's face was serious, and her eyes were full of killing intent. She thought to herself, once such a person's cultivation is successful, she will definitely become Li Yundong's right-hand man, but also my own enemy. Zhou Qin can't be left alive. She must be killed. Groups 1 to 10 are full. Don't join them if you want to join the group. Please add 134426916. Chapter 433. Go to watch net. Once Yan Fang got serious, Zhou Qin would have no chance of winning. After all, sometimes the gap in strength could not be made up by risking one's life. Watch net. 7 KOM. This cultivator of the Linggong sect was once known as the most outstanding female cultivator in the cultivation world in the past 100 years. She had reached the Zhuji phase at the age of 12 and the Yangshan phase at the age of 14. Her talent was so high that it was a legend in the cultivation world at that time. She and Wang Yuanshan were once regarded by the cultivation world as the most enviable immortal couple. In the future, they would be husband and wife, a harmonious couple. Yan Fang of the Linggong sect was said to be unparalleled at that time. She was faintly regarded as the future #1 female cultivator in the world. But no one expected that Wang Yuanshan would eventually meet Ao Wushuang. From then on, the Linggong sect fell apart, and Wang Yuanshan disappeared. In order to take revenge, Yan Fang hid her identity for 9 years. The great reputation she had made in the past was gradually forgotten. At this moment, this former genius was seriously sizing up the young woman who had only cultivated for a month. Her eyes were filled with shock and hostility. In Yan Fang's opinion, although Zi Yuan's talent was not inferior to hers, she was indifferent and aloof from worldly affairs. She only wanted to become an immortal. Although her future cultivation was limitless, she was her martial niece after all. It was impossible for her to deal with her ruthlessly. In fact, she could not pose much of a threat to her. Although Li Yundong is a genius, it will be difficult for him to do it alone. With me sniping in the dark, it will be difficult for him to carry forward the Fox Zen school. However, Yan Fang did not expect that Zhou Qin would suddenly emerge as a new force. Her talent in cultivation and fighting methods was shocking. The scariest thing was that this girl was the daughter of a wealthy family, the descendant of an official. Once she grew up, with her background and strength, she would definitely become a fearsome character in the cultivation world. When the power of cultivation was combined with royal power, the power it catalyzed was unimaginable to anyone. Yan Fang looked at Zhou Qin seriously and said slowly, "Zhou Qin, apart from Zi Yuan, you are the most talented female cultivator I've ever seen. It stands to reason that the cultivation world is declining now. It should be a great blessing for the cultivation world to have a talent like you, but Yen Fong took a deep breath and sighed, but unfortunately, I have to kill you with my own hands. Because you are helping the wicked. Zhou Qin sneered and said, do you think that you are the only one in the world who is righteous and everyone else is evil? What makes you think you're doing the right thing? Yen Fong snorted coldly and said, I won't argue with you. If you have any last words, just say them now. It was the first time that Zhou Qin had faced such a powerful enemy. She did not panic at all. Instead, she stood tall and looked at Yen Fong calmly. She held the Vulcan's whip in one hand and the Chiwei in the other, saying proudly, if you have the ability, come at me. Yen Fong said, Humph, do you think I will give you a chance to get close to me? Let me tell you, with your current cultivation level, even 100 of you wouldn't be my match. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly heard an elegant and quiet voice in the dark night. What if I'm included? As soon as Yen Fong heard the voice, a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. Ziyuan? She turned her head and saw a woman in white slowly walking out of the night. The woman was wearing a long dress, her black hair piled up like clouds, and her figure was as ethereal as a fairy. It was Ziyuan. There was a threatening chill in Yen Fong's voice. She said coldly, Ziyuan, are you really determined to go against me? Have you ever thought about what Shixiang would think if he knew what you had done? Ziyuan looked at Yen Fong with a complicated look in her eyes. She sighed softly and said, Shibua, as the saying goes, it's better to get rid of enmity than to keep it alive. I think you'd better let go. Yen Fong raised her head and laughed. You're talking nonsense again. You're a good person, but you're so sentimental. Ziyuan, let me tell you, when I uncover the big conspiracy of the Fox Zen school one day, you'll know whether I'm right or wrong. Ziyuan's face was as dark as water. She said, Shibua, whether it's a conspiracy or not is another matter for the time being. But what did Zhou Qin do to make you want to kill her so badly that you want to kill her? Yen Fong said sternly, this woman can't tell right from wrong. She doesn't know good from evil. She's helping the wicked. Everyone has the right to punish her. Ziyuan asked faintly, Shibua, may I ask who this person is? Who was this Zhou who was helping the evildoer? Also, how did she abuse her? If you have any real evidence, please show it to me. I will not be partial to her. Yen Fong sneered and said, helping the wicked is a great evil. There's no need for real evidence. Ziyuan sighed softly and said, Shibua, this is your fault. As cultivators, we naturally have to be reasonable in our actions and words. As the saying goes, if you are reasonable, you can walk all over the world. If you are unreasonable, you can't do anything. Shibua, although you are my elder, please forgive me for being rude. You can't touch a single hair of Zhou Qin's. Yen Fong laughed angrily and said, good, good, good. I've long wanted to see your kung fu. I don't know if your kung fu has improved. However, to be honest, I know your Shentong kung fu very well, but do you know what kind of Shentong kung fu I've been practicing in the past 9 years? Ziyuan said faintly, just now, Shibua, you used the Liujia God-inviting talisman to invite the gods to descend to the world. This kind of high-level talisman is clearly the kung fu of the Maoshan sect. I think your kung fu has already passed through the two great Taoist sects of Zhengyi and Maoshan. Even if you don't have the Liuha in your hand, you can already be called a great cultivator. Yen Fong snorted and said, it's good that you know. Do you think that I can't do anything to you because you have a helper? Ziyuan suddenly smiled and said, Shibua, do you know why I'm here? Yen Fong frowned slightly. Her eyes narrowed and she said in a cold voice, could it be that Li Yundong arranged this? Ziyuan looked at the Liuha, which was still fighting with the two heavenly soldiers. She smiled slightly and said, Shibua, you've fallen into Li Yundong's trap of luring the snake out of its hole. The reason why he gave the Liuha to Zhou Qin is that he wants her to protect herself and that he wants to lure you out. Yen Fong was not angry when she heard this. Instead, she laughed and said, what a good trick of luring the snake out of its hole. He actually used his own direct disciple as bait. This master is really competent. Seeing that Yan Fang was trying to sow discord, Zhou Qin snorted coldly and said, Master told me this at the beginning. Do you think I don't know how dangerous this matter is? Humph, with a thorn like you by his side, Master can't sleep or eat in peace. As long as I can get rid of you, not to mention putting myself in danger, even if I have to go through a mountain of knives and a sea of fire, I will still go through it. Yan Fang suddenly looked at Zhou Qin with some emotion. At this moment, she seemed to see herself in the past, the infatuated woman who could do anything for the person she loved. For a moment, Yan Fang's heart felt as if it had been overturned. She felt a trace of emotion for Zhou Qin, but also a trace of resonance from recalling the past. She saw that Zhou Qin could even give up her life for Li Yundong. If she tried to sow discord, it would really be asking for humiliation. Understanding this, Yan Fang snorted coldly and stopped trying to sow discord. She sneered and said, even if I fell into the trap of luring the snake, so what? What can you do to me? However, Ziyuan asked back, Shibua, you said that in order to lure you out, we painstakingly set up such a trap. How can we not have a foolproof plan? It's true that I'm not as good as you in terms of fighting. Even with Zhou Qin, we may not be your match, but why do you think that Li Yundong won't show up for such a big thing? Yan Fang's face changed drastically. She said in surprise, is that little bastard Li Yundong here too? As soon as she finished speaking, she saw a figure walking out of the thick night behind Ziyuan, staring at Yan Fang fiercely. It was Li Yundong. When Yan Fang saw Li Yundong, she was slightly shocked. She gritted her teeth and said, sure enough, this little bastard is here too. Ziyuan had a wise look on her face. She smiled and said, Shibua, do you still have a chance of winning now? Although Yan Fang was angry in her heart, she knew very well that if she fought against Li Yundong, she would still have a 50-50 chance of winning. But if Ziyuan was added to the mix, and there was also Zhou Qin, who was desperate and always wanted to exchange her life for her life, then she would have absolutely no chance of winning at all. Moreover, Yan Fang had been lurking around Li Yundong these days. She knew best about Li Yundong's cultivation strength at this time. Not to mention anything else, just at the opening ceremony of the Desanxian, Li Yundong's move of the divine dragon playing with water had forced the Lady of the Earthly Fire, Zhangling, to retreat. At that time, when she saw it upstairs, she was also shocked to the point that her scalp went numb. At that time, the ordinary people watching the fun in the tea house didn't know what it was, but she, Yan Fang, knew what it was. She knew how terrifying it was to be able to do this. In the face of such a powerful opponent, her momentum was really a little discouraged before the fight even started. As soon as Yan Fang's momentum weakened, Zhou Qin was keenly aware of it. She immediately shouted aggressively, Yan Fang, hand over the Emperor's clock and release Ao Wushuang. Otherwise, today will be the day you die. Yan Fang laughed angrily and said, how dare you, a rookie who has just entered the sect, yell at me? As she said this, she turned to Ziyuan and sneered, Ziyuan, do you think your plan of alerting the enemy and luring the snake out of its hole is very clever? Ziyuan said, it's not very clever, but it works. Yan Fang sneered and said, do you think I can't see through your little tricks? You gave the Lioha to a little girl who hasn't even reached the Zhuji phase, and you did it in front of me. Do you think I can't see what Li Yundong is up to? Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, even so, Shibua, you still showed up, didn't you? The Lioha is too important to you. You knew it was a trap, but you still jumped into it. Yan Fang laughed and said, so what if I showed up? The world is so big. I can come and go as I please. Who can stop me? Moreover, if you can use this trick of alerting the snake out of its hole, can't I beat you at your own game and use the trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain? Ziyuan's face changed. She said, Shibua, what do you mean by that? Yan Fang smiled proudly and said, Ziyuan, you don't understand anything at all. Compared with the Lyoha, Chow Kefi's life is more important to me. I don't want the Lyoha, but she must die. Zi Yuan couldn't help but say angrily, Shibwa, Chow Kefi is just a secular mortal. Why do you keep making things difficult for her? Yen Fang sneered, a secular mortal? Have you ever seen a secular mortal with only one soul and 3 spirits? As far as I know, the big conspiracy of the Fox Zen School is closely related to Chow Kefi. Humph, I came here today to steal the Lyoha, not for anything else, but to get you away from Chow Kefi so that I can make a move. Zi Yuan said, Shibwa, even if you can get us out, when you fly back, we can also fly back with you. At most, we will arrive together. How can you do it? Yen Fang laughed and said, Zi Yuan, you saw me use the talisman magic of the Maoshan sect just now. You have read all the cultivation classics since you were 13 years old. Don't you know that there is a magic called shrinking earth into an inch in the talisman magic of the Maoshan sect? After that, Yen Fang suddenly took out a talisman from her sleeve. With a loud shout, she pinched her fingers together, and the talisman began to burn by itself in the blink of an eye, emitting a dazzling yellow light. This burst of yellow light was so dazzling that Zhou Qin couldn't help but cover her eyes with her hands and close them tightly. When she saw the yellow light disappear, she opened her eyes, only to see that there was no one in front of her. Even the 2 6-armor heavenly soldiers that Yen Fang had summoned before had disappeared. Zhou Qin was shocked. Oh no, Yen Fang ran away. Vote recommendation previous page return to directory next page error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 434. Please remember the domain name of this site. Or search on Baidu, Somnian Literature Network, Zhou Qin shouted. She subconsciously turned to look in the direction of Tiannan City, then looked at Li Yundong eagerly and shouted, Master, chase after her. Yen Fang ran back to kill President Chow. However, Li Yundong stood where he was, turning a deaf ear to her and not moving at all. Zhou Qin was very anxious. She rushed to Li Yundong, grabbed his shoulder with both hands, shook it hard, and said loudly, Master, say something. But as soon as she finished speaking, she saw Li Yundong's body suddenly shake, and then his whole body was ignited in flames. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared, leaving only a burning talisman in the air, slowly falling down. Zhou Qin was stunned. She stared at the talisman that had fallen to the ground and burned to ashes. She stammered, What's going on? Zhou Qin turned to look at Zi Yuan and said loudly, Zi Yuan, what the hell is going on? Zi Yuan couldn't help but laugh softly. Zhou Qin, this Li Yundong is fake. Zhou Qin was tongue-tied. Fake? Is this magic? Zi Yuan nodded slightly and said, Yes, this is the Liujia Yang spirit talisman. Li Yundong and I had a private discussion. We decided to set up an ambush on both sides and wait for Yen Fang to appear. However, if I appeared alone, I wouldn't be able to scare Yen Fang away. Therefore, I made a fake Li Yundong to help me. Hey, as I expected, Yen Fang immediately fell into the trap. Zhou Qin couldn't help but ask, but why does Yen Fang want to make life difficult for Chow Kefi? Zi Yuan frowned slightly. She frowned and thought for a while, then said, I'm not sure about this, but when I first saw Chow Kefi, I felt that this woman was too coquettish, and she only had 1 soul and 3 spirits in her body, which was different from ordinary people. Now it seems that Chow Kefi has a good relationship with the Fox Zen School, and I saw that when the Shibwa of the Fox Zen School saw Chow Kefi, they all looked shocked. Obviously, they knew Chow Kefi. Zhou Qin opened her mouth wide, her face full of disbelief. No way, President Chow is from the Fox Zen School? Then she is also a... The word vixen had a derogatory connotation, so Zhou Qin didn't say it in the end. However, Ziyuan shook her head and said, no, if it's a fox demon body, there will be demonic qi all over her body, and I can easily detect it. But what puzzled me was that Chao Kefi didn't have a trace of fox spirit aura on her. Why did she have a connection with the Fox Zen school? Why did she only have one spiritual soul and 3 physical forms? This is unbelievable. Zhou Qin thought for a moment and said tentatively, shall I ask President Chao another day? Ziyuan smiled and said, Zhou Qin, the most important thing for you now is to build the Zhuji phase. You don't have to worry about anything else. Think about it, when your master Li Yundong was in the Zhuji phase, he sold his phone so that he wouldn't miss her. You can't go on the road with worries in your heart. Otherwise, if you are half-hearted, you will definitely suffer from qi deviation. Zhou Qin's expression turned serious. I've learned something. I understand. I'll leave Yan Fang's matter to you, Ziyuan. Ziyuan smiled and said, you don't have to be so polite. If nothing unexpected happens, we will be able to find out the traitor of the Fox Zen school tonight. Zhou Qin seemed to have thought of something and asked, but Yan Fang has the body of Yang spirit. She can come and go freely, and her speed is extremely fast. Moreover, she used the body of Yang spirit to kill Chao Kefi. How do you know which one is her real body? Ziyuan smiled confidently and said, we have our own ways to force her to show her real body. Zhou Qin subconsciously wanted to ask more questions, but she didn't want to show that she didn't know anything in front of Ziyuan, so she held back the question and said, I know, but it's a pity that I can't help master. Ziyuan shook her head slightly and said with a chuckle, no, you have already helped Li Yundong a lot by putting yourself in danger. Although he didn't say it, he knew it very well in his heart. Moreover, neither Li Yundong nor I can help you anymore in the future. You have to go on by yourself. Zhou Qin knew that Ziyuan, who was like a fairy in front of her, had once begged alms for thousands of miles and finally succeeded in the Zhuji phase after going through all kinds of hardships. She thought to herself, if Ziyuan can do it, why can't I? Thinking of this, Zhou Qin's chest suddenly became full of pride. She smiled and said, please tell master to wait for my good news. I will definitely succeed in the Zhuji phase. Ziyuan nodded slightly and smiled. Then, she turned into a beam of blue light and left in an instant, leaving Zhou Qin alone in the night of the barren mountain. She looked up at the direction in which Ziyuan had left, lost in thought. Just as Zhou Qin was embarking on her cultivation journey again, in the advanced nursing ward of the Second People's Hospital of Tiannan City, Chao Kefi was texting Lu Feier on her mobile phone. Lu Feier's text message said, Sister Chao, I've already returned to the crew. The director is scolding you. Chao Kefi smiled, pressed her fingers lightly, and quickly sent a text message back. When does this guy not scold people? Besides, I don't believe that he only scolds me and not you. Lu Feier texted back, yes, he scolded everyone in the crew once, and I was scolded twice. He's so fierce. Chao Kefi replied with a smile, why, do you regret it? Why did you insist on following me back then? Lu Feier sent a grimacing emoji. I don't regret it. This trip has broadened my horizons. From now on, I can be considered a knowledgeable person. I know that there is a master like Li Yundong in this world, so I didn't get scolded for nothing. In my opinion, these guys in the crew are the frogs at the bottom of the well. They are all ignorant. Chao Kefi couldn't help laughing. You little girl, you're brilliant with a little sunshine. You've only seen him once, and you think you're knowledgeable? Do you know how he got his kung fu skills? I don't even know. I don't even dare to say that I'm knowledgeable. You little girl, aren't you afraid of blowing your own trumpet? Lu Feier replied, as the saying goes, if one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening without regrets. Seeing some things once is enough. Anyway, I think I've broadened my horizons. Chao Kefi scolded with a smile, since you've achieved the Tao, then go to hell. Don't make a fool of yourself here. Lu Feier sent another grimacing emoji. Ah, then I'm going to die. I'm going to sleep until I die. Sister Chow, you have to be careful. Don't lose your soul again. Hee, you have to ask Li Yundong to help you find your soul. After reading this message, the smile on Chow Kefi's face suddenly sank. This beautiful and strong woman had countless pursuers, including many outstanding business elites and handsome and sunny men. However, she had fallen for this young boy who was still a little green at first glance. Especially during the period when Li Yundong was missing, she was really lost every day. It took a long time for her to recover. It wasn't until she met him again that her soul seemed to have really come back. Especially 2 days ago, she really lost her soul for a while, and it was really Li Yundong who found her soul. Is this guy really my enemy in my previous life? I lost my soul, and I had to ask him to help me find it? Chow Kefi suddenly giggled, and her plump red lips spat out 2 heart-wrenching words, enemy. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly saw a cold wind blowing in the ward, and the curtains on the balcony were raised high. This gust of cold wind blew up the curtains, like a cold current, and rushed toward Chow Kefi. At this moment, Chow Kefi only felt that her whole body was ice cold. It was as if something had drilled into her body. It was as if there was a hook that was trying to hook the soul in her body and was desperately pulling it out. This feeling was exactly the same as what Chow Kefi had experienced in Di Hao. She opened her mouth wide and wanted to shout and struggle desperately, but all the strength in her body disappeared at this moment. Chow Kefi's heart was cold. She thought in horror, who on earth wants to kill me? Who did I offend? As soon as this thought popped up in her mind, she suddenly felt as if she was floating in the air. She was able to look down at her body sitting on the hospital bed. Then there was a sudden fierce fighting sound in front of her hospital bed, as if there were 2 invisible people fighting fiercely. The 2 people were fighting so fiercely that the surrounding air was shaking. Chow Kefi thought faintly, is Li Yundong protecting me? If it is him, why doesn't he show up? As soon as this thought came to her mind, she heard a loud and low mantra of the Buddha. Hey! This shout was really like the evening drum and morning bell, like the sound of a great bell ringing on a great river in the dead of winter, or like the solemn and dignified chanting of Buddha in a quiet and lonely empty mountain. This sound shocked Chow Kefi's soul. She could feel that there seemed to be an invisible hand in the air around her, pulling her soul again and letting her slowly float back to her body. When Chow Kefi's soul returned, she opened her eyes again and saw Li Yundong standing in front of her bed like a mountain, as if he was an insurmountable mountain. Li Yundong's hands flew up and down, quickly pinching 2 fixed fundamental seals and the Buddha's seal. He slapped them toward a place where there was no one in front of him. With a muffled bang, a person seemed to be sent flying by him in an instant and hit the wall, shaking the room. Then the person appeared. It was Yen Fong. Yen Fong's hair was disheveled, and blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth. She looked at Li Yundong in shock and said loudly, "This is impossible. How could you come back so quickly?" Li Yundong snorted and said in a deep voice, "Yen Fong, today is your last day. I advise you to hand over the Emperor's clock and release Ao Wushuang. Otherwise, I will destroy your body and soul." When Yen Fong heard Li Yundong's words, her body suddenly shook, and she quickly understood the key point. She said bitterly, "I actually fell into your trap. The one beside Zi Yuan is a dummy, right?" Li Yundong said, "Yes." Yen Fong said angrily, "I didn't expect to fall into your hands." Good. Li Yundong sneered and said, "Why on earth do you have to kill Chow Kefi? How did she offend you?" Yen Fong burst out laughing. Her? When did she offend me? It's just that she has a sinful body, so she must die. Li Yundong said angrily, **T. What sinful body? What sin has she committed? Tell me. Yen Fong laughed and said, "Li Yundong, when you participate in the Taoist assembly, you will understand everything." After that, she moved and rushed out of the window like lightning. The flying speed of the young spirit was the fastest, and it was impossible for the physical body to catch up. Li Yundong was very clear about this, so he immediately shouted loudly. The young spirit instantly went out of his body and chased after her like a shadow. At this time, there was silence in the ward. Although Chow Kefi knew that Li Yundong wanted to use her as bait to lure out the real murderer, she had never expected that she would witness such a scene that was like a magic movie. She had originally thought that what she had seen from Li Yundong before was incredible enough, but she had not expected that what she had seen today would completely subvert her understanding. Just as she was in a daze, Chow Kefi's cell phone suddenly rang again. She came to her senses, picked up her cell phone and glanced at it. It was a text message from Lu Feier. Sister Chow, why haven't you replied for so long? What are you doing? I'm so bored in the crew. Chow Kefi's expression was dull as she casually sent a text message back. Feier, come with the director to see God. To quickly find this site, please search on Baidu, Somnian Literature website. Chapter 435. Go to watch net. Li Yundong's body stayed in the ward, but the young spirit followed Yen Fong like a shadow. Watch net. 7 KOM. At this time, he had already cultivated to the top realm of the young spirit. The body of the young spirit could change at will. As soon as he thought of it, the young spirit transformed into an immovable wisdom king with 3 heads and 6 arms. His 6 arms kept pinching Mahamudra, like a moving fort, chasing after Yen Fong and bombarding her. At first, Yen Fong threw out a few talismans and summoned the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in an attempt to stop Li Yundong. But as soon as she summoned these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, Li Yundong immediately slapped them with a fierce Mahamudra. It was like Mount Tai pressing down, immediately smashing these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. When Yen Fong saw that these heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals had been smashed into pieces, she couldn't help but be shocked. She paused for a moment and saw Li Yunyang's Samadhi Vajra seal coming toward her. Yen Fong subconsciously dodged, and the astral wind of the Mahamudra brushed past her back. Although Yen Fong was a young spirit body, she still felt as if her back had been whipped by a steel whip. It was a burning pain. This was merely a graze from the astral wind, and it was already so painful. What would happen if this giant palm were to hit his body? If Yen Fong had a magical item in her hand, she could still fight with Li Yundong. But at this time, she was empty-handed and had run out of talismans. How could she resist Li Yundong's extremely powerful young spirit true body? Yen Fong's heart was pounding with fear. She didn't dare to stay any longer. As she fled frantically, she shouted, Li Yundong, you little B***starred, don't you want to know where Ao Wushuang is? Li Yundong sneered and said, as long as I catch you, I have plenty of ways to make you talk. Yen Fong was furious. She gritted her teeth and said, you will regret it, Li Yundong. You will definitely regret it. Li Yunyang didn't answer. He just stared at Yen Fong like lightning. His young spirit flew quickly and kept a close eye on Yen Fong's figure. It was night time, and the two of them were flying in the air like 2 beams of cyan light. The cyan light transformed from Li Yundong's young spirit emitted a burst of golden light from time to time. These rays of light sometimes chased after each other, and sometimes entangled together, emitting a dazzling brilliance. After fighting with Li Yundong for a while, Yen Fong was shocked to find that she couldn't get rid of Li Yundong's pursuit at all. No matter how long she could run, Li Yundong could chase her. Yen Fong gritted her teeth and quickly descended, flying toward her residence in the new Riverside district. Seeing that Yen Fong had suddenly fled home, Li Yundong was furious and shouted, Yen Fong, I've already set up a trap at home. Do you want to go back and court death? Yen Fong paused slightly, as if she was frightened by Li Yundong's words, but she quickly accelerated again and rushed into Li Yundong's residence like lightning. Li Yundong shouted and made 3 Mahamudra in a row, blocking all of Yen Fang's paths. However, Yen Fang didn't dodge. As if she didn't notice the Mahamudra behind her, she still rushed straight to her residence. But when she was still 100 or 200 meters away from her residence, Li Yundong's Mahamudra caught up with her and slapped her heavily on the back. Yen Fang screamed, and her yang spirit body was instantly torn apart, turning into countless tiny cyan lights and quickly rushing into her residence. Li Yundong also rushed into the house like a shadow. At this time, the little foxes of the Fox Zen School were watching TV in the living room. They saw a flash of cyan light, and countless tiny rays of light went straight to Chao Yi's room. Before they could react, they saw Li Yundong suddenly rush in and go straight to Chao Yi's room with a murderous look. Like a rampaging beast, Li Yundong smashed open the door of Chao Yi's room. He took a look inside and saw that the French windows of Chao Yi's bedroom were open. The curtains were fluttering in the west wind, but there was no one in the room. The little foxes watched in a daze as Li Yundong kicked open Chao Yi's room with a bang. He took a look inside, then turned his head and said coldly, "Where is your Chao Yi Shibwa?" The little foxes were so frightened by Li Yundong that they couldn't speak. Lu Yuehong, who was sitting with them, boldly asked, "Leader, what happened? Hasn't Sixth Shimmy been meditating and practicing qi in her room?" Li Yundong pointed to the empty room and said coldly, "You said she was practicing qi. Where is she?" Lu Yuehong was frightened by Li Yundong's expression, which seemed to be about to eat someone. She stammered, "Isn't Sixth Shimmy here? Maybe she has something to do." Li Yundong said in a cold voice, "What could she be doing at this time?" Lu Yuehong stammered and couldn't say anything. Li Yundong's eyes swept over everyone's faces in the room like a knife. He asked coldly, "Where is Zhuang Yiting Shibwa? Where is she?" As soon as Li Yundong's voice fell, he saw the door of Zhuang Yiting's room open with a creak. The enchanting and coquettish Shibwa of the Fox Zen School, who was wearing pajamas, yawned and walked out. She asked sleepily, "What's wrong? What happened?" Li Yundong stared at her like lightning for a long time, then asked coldly, "Third Shibwa, have you been sleeping in your room all this time?" Zhuang Yiting said with a strange expression, "Of course." Li Yundong narrowed his eyes slightly, and his gaze was so sharp that it seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. He asked in a deep voice, "Who can testify?" Zhuang Yiting smiled slightly and said, "Everyone here can testify. I've been in my room all this time and haven't come out." Li Yundong turned his head and looked at the silly foxes in the living room. When the little foxes saw Li Yundong looking at them, they immediately nodded. Li Yundong nodded slightly. He snorted coldly and asked, "Do you know where Chao Yi went?" Zhuang Yiting was stunned. "I don't know." But she quickly asked tentatively, "Leader, what happened?" Lu Yuehong, who had been keeping a low profile in the Fox Zen School, was also keenly aware that when Li Yundong addressed Chao Yi, he no longer called her Shibwa Chao Yi. Instead, he called her by her name. This had never happened since Li Yundong took over as the leader. Oh no, something must have happened. An ominous thought suddenly flashed through Lu Yuehong's mind. She stood up and asked, "Leader, what happened?" Li Yundong's sharp eyes swept over them, and his eyes were full of suspicion and suspicion. His cold eyes made the little foxes shudder, and they shivered in their hearts. At this time, Su Chan, who had heard the noise, came out of her room. She rubbed her eyes and said in confusion, "Yundong, what happened?" Hearing Su Chan's voice, Li Yundong turned his head. When his cold eyes fell on the little girl, they gradually became soft and warm. Li Yundong closed his eyes and sighed slowly. After a while, he opened his eyes and said, "There's a traitor in our Fox Zen School." The little foxes were shocked. "A traitor? Who is it?" Lu Yuehong was also shocked. "Leader, who are you talking about? Do you have any real evidence?" However, Zhuang Yiting's face was full of sarcasm. She snorted coldly and said, "Leader, now the truth has come to light, hasn't it? I've long said that Chao Yi is a traitor. Li Yundong's face darkened and he didn't speak, but Lu Yuehong's face was full of anxiety. She glared at Zhuang Yiting and shouted, "Third Shiji, how can you say that? How could sixth Shiji be a traitor?" Zhuang Yiting smiled coldly and looked at Li Yundong. She said, "Leader has already made a conclusion in his heart. Listen to him." Li Yundong looked at the panicked little foxes. He saw that these little foxes, who were usually carefree, were now looking at him in panic, with doubts and worries in their eyes. Li Yundong sighed and waved to the little foxes, motioning for them to sit down. Then, he waved to Su Chan, motioning for her to sit down beside him. After they were all seated, Li Yundong sighed softly and said, "Shibwa Zhuang Yiting is right. Chao Yi is indeed a traitor of our Fox Zen school. Or rather, she is no longer the Shibwa Chao Yi you know. She is just a traitor with Chao Yi's physical body, but the yang spirit of her soul is someone else's." Lu Yuehong's body swayed slightly, and her face suddenly turned pale. She had grown up with Chao Yi. Although they were not sisters, they were as close as sisters. At this time, hearing Li Yundong's words, it was like a shocking lightning strike. She said in a trembling voice, "Leader, what did you say? Who is possessing sixth Shiji?" Li Yundong looked at her sympathetically. "It's Yan Fang." The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The little foxes were so shocked that they all stood up, their hair standing on end. They couldn't believe Li Yundong's words, but the facts were right in front of them, so they had to believe it. The little foxes clearly remembered that it was Yan Fang who had killed their powerful little Shibwa Yi Yu in Mount Tianlong. It was also Yan Fang who had planned the plan to destroy the Fox Zen school. If it hadn't been for Li Yundong's sudden appearance, the Fox Zen school would have been wiped out by all the major sects. To them, Yan Fang was not only the name of a mortal enemy, but also a nightmarish name. None of them had expected that Imo Ashi, the Shiji they respected the most in the Fox Zen school, was actually Yan Fang. And now, Chao Yi, who had been with them day and night, was actually Yan Fang again. This was really terrifying. But what was even more terrifying was that Yan Fang had escaped again. For a moment, the little foxes all thought, since Yan Fang can attach herself to Chao Yi Shibwa, then she can definitely attach herself to me, and in the future, she can also attach herself to other Shijin Shimi. In an instant, the little foxes looked at each other with suspicion and vigilance, as if the most familiar person around them would become the terrible Yan Fang in the next second. Seeing that the little foxes were all suspicious and wary, Li Yundong frowned secretly and said, "You don't have to worry. Yan Fang's yang spirit has been seriously injured by me. Even if she escapes, she won't be able to come out and do evil for a while. If she still wants to live, she will definitely recuperate for a period of time." Li Yundong pondered for a while and said, "Moreover, the reason why Yan Fang was able to possess Chao Yi is probably because Chao Yi was once alone in Mount Tianlong, which gave Yan Fang the opportunity to take advantage of her. From today on, none of you can be alone. In this way, Yan Fang will definitely not dare to act rashly." Only then did the little foxes feel a little relieved, but they all frowned and looked worried. Some of them couldn't help but choke up and say, "Chao Yi Shibwa was fine. How could she have become that evil Yan Fang?" As soon as someone cried, the others couldn't help but follow suit. Immediately, someone whimpered and echoed, "Leader, you have to avenge Chao Yi Shibwa." Lu Yuehong also burst into tears. She knelt down in front of Li Yundong and said tearfully, "Leader, I know that you are powerful. You will definitely be able to find Yan Fang and avenge sixth Shimi." Li Yundong sighed and reached out to help her up. "You don't have to do this. As the leader of the sect, I also have a lot of responsibility for what happened in the sect. You don't have to say anything about this matter. I will definitely give you an explanation. From today on, I, Li Yundong, will chase Yan Fang to the end." Zhuang Yiting gritted her teeth and said hatefully, "Leader, if there's anything you need, just tell me. Li Yunyang nodded at her and sighed softly. You all go to rest. The tea house will open as usual tomorrow. No matter what, this thorn in our flesh has finally been pulled out. We can live a stable and leisurely life for a while. After hearing Li Yundong's words, the little foxes wiped their tears and went to their rooms. Lu Yuehong and Zhuang Muting also said goodbye and went into their rooms. Seeing that everyone around had left, Su Chan's face was full of sadness. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, Yundong, Yan Feng ran away again. I'm afraid she won't show up again this time. Will we not be able to find my master's whereabouts? Li Yundong gently stroked her black hair and said softly, No, I'm sure that Yan Feng will definitely appear at the Taoist assembly. Although her yang spirit comes and goes very quickly, I have already found a way to deal with her. Su Chan raised her head and looked at Li Yundong with tears in her big black eyes. She choked with doubt and said doubtfully, Are you serious? Li Yundong smiled and said, Of course. Jinren doesn't lie. The little girl wiped her tears and said with a smile, Then I believe you. Li Yundong stroked the little girl's long hair lovingly with one hand and put the other hand behind his back. He looked meaningfully at the endless night outside the window sill and said slowly, Channer, just watch. It will definitely be a very lively Taoist assembly. Sorry, I just got home. There's still one more night to go. Vote for recommendation previous page return to table of contents next page error report if you like it. Please click here to add Keeping a Vixen at Home to your bookshelf so that you can read the latest chapters and updates in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Vixen at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 436. Go to watch net. When Zi Yuan returned to her residence, Li Yundong had already been waiting in the living room for a long time. Go to watch net. The young and handsome leader was sitting on the sofa in the living room like a statue, quietly thinking about something. When Zi Yuan saw Li Yundong, she immediately asked, How is it? Have you found second Shibwa? Li Yundong raised his eyes, looked at her, and said, I found her. It's Chao Yi. Zi Yuan was slightly shocked. It's really her? Where is she? Li Yundong sighed softly and frowned. She ran away. Zi Yuan was shocked. She ran away again? This is not good. Li Yundong looked worried. He pondered for a while and said, The only thing I'm glad about now is that before Yan Feng escaped, I used Mahamudra to seriously injure her yang spirit body. Although she has escaped now, she can't do evil for a while. Zi Yuan couldn't help asking, Then have you figured out why second Shibwa has to kill Chao Kefi? Li Yundong shook his head and said, The only thing I can be sure of is that Yan Feng will definitely show up again. What we need to do now is to think of a way to capture the yang spirit of a cultivator. Otherwise, the next time she shows up, it will be useless if we can't catch her yang spirit. Zi Yuan frowned. She looked around and winked at Li Yundong. Li Yundong understood. The two of them went to the open space on the roof. After making sure that there was no one around, Zi Yuan said softly, You should know Zhang Budwan, one of the 5 ancestors of Taoism in the south. Li Yundong nodded. I know. You mentioned him before. He is the great master of the south sect of Jindan sect, who advocates dual cultivation of life and death. He is also the founder of the Ziyang sect of Taoism. Zi Yuan nodded slightly and said, In Zhang Budwan's Wuzhen chapter, there is a saying, Don't know the confusion and the mystery, but know that it is good to plant lotuses in the fire. Bring the white tiger home to raise, and give birth to a pearl like the full moon. Watch the fire of the medicine furnace, but calm the mind and let nature take its course. When the group of Yin is peeled, the elixir matures, and jumps out of the cage and lives for 10,000 years. You can be considered an expert in the cultivation world now. You should know what this cultivation poem means, right? Li Yundong was a little puzzled as to why Zi Yuan had suddenly started talking about cultivation poems from a place that was thousands of miles away from the topic, but he still replied, I know. The first two sentences of this poem refer to the kung fu of cultivators in the foundation establishment phase. Refining Niden in the Dantian real fire is like refining lotus seeds. The last two sentences refer to the skill of refining Niden after the Zhuji phase, and the last sentence refers to when a cultivator's yin spirit is cultivated to a certain level, Niden will completely mature and be cultivated to the top level, that is, the Yangshan phase. Once a person reaches the Yangshan phase, he can jump out of the cage and be free from the shackles of birth, old age, sickness, and death. He can live as long as 10,000 years and live as long as heaven. Zi Yuan smiled with slight admiration and said, That's right. You are also a person who has cultivated to the Yangshan phase. Since you understand the cultivation principle of the Yangshan, you should know that the Yangshan is the sublimation of the divine qi after it is mixed. The virtual spirit has no substance, but it has a body that is useful. When it is gathered, it will take shape, and when it is scattered, it will become qi. If you want to capture the yang spirit of a person in such a realm, it will be more difficult than ascending to heaven. Unless. Li Yundong was a little discouraged at first, but when he heard the last part, he became spirited again and quickly asked, Unless what? Zi Yuan thought for a moment, hesitated for a moment, then said, Unless there is a special magical item and a special magic circle. Li Yundong asked, What special magical item and magic circle? Zi Yuan said, In fact, you have seen this magical item before. It is the burning thumb pot that Du Fei wanted to exchange with you for the Renyuan Jin Dan. Li Yundong was slightly surprised. The burning thumb pot? You mean the magical item of Taoism? Zi Yuan nodded and said, That's right. This is a very powerful and famous magical item of Buddhism. In fact, Du Fei was also very cunning to exchange it with you. Because he is a Taoist cultivator, he can't use Buddhist magical items, so he sold this magical item to you at a low price. Holding this magical item is tantamount to throwing a bright pearl into the dark, and it is easy to attract the covetous eyes of Buddhist cultivation masters. But if this magical item falls into your hands, it will definitely be like adding wings to a tiger. Li Yundong said curiously, After talking for a long time, you still haven't told me what this magical item is used for. How can it capture the yang spirit of a cultivator? Zi Yuan laughed and said, The burning thumb pot is a powerful magical item that Fahai used to subdue demons. When it is taken out, not only can it release a powerful Buddhist power to deter demons and evil qi, but it can also capture the spiritual qi between heaven and earth. In the past, Fahai relied on the burning thumb pot to deter demons and evil qi, as well as the characteristics of capturing the spiritual qi between heaven and earth. That's how he was able to subdue the 1,000-year-old white snake. Li Yundong couldn't help but ask, Didn't Du Fei say last time that this was a romance? Why does it sound like it's a serious matter? Zi Yuan smiled and said, The legend of the white snake is a romance that portrays Fahai as the villain. But in fact, in the history of the cultivation world, Fahai is a famous demon exorcist. During the Tianbao years of Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty, Prime Minister Pei Xiu wrote a poem at that time. The poem said, Sending a son into the void with sorrow, one should plant good roots after a long time. This poem is about his son, Fahai. Therefore, his son, Fahai, is also known as Pei Tuchuo, and these records are quoted from the southern Tang Munking Ji's Tuchuo rock records. Jinshan used to be called Fuyu, because Pei Tuchuo obtained gold in the river. In the 21st year of Zhen Yuan, Tang, Commander Li Qi reported to the court and gave it the name Jinshan. At the same time, the Jinshan annals also recorded, the Python Cave, on the side of the right peak, is steep and dangerous, about 4 or 5 feet deep. In the past, a white python appeared to bite people, and Pei Tuchuo subdued it and obtained the gold to rebuild the blue. The Song dynasty poet Zhang Shangying wrote a poem, Half a stone room is a meditation place, and it is not easy to gain fame. The white python turned into a dragon and returned to the sea, leaving the old Tuchuo in the rock. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan said with a smile, from this, it can be seen that the matter of Fahai subduing the white snake is true. Li Yundong watched as Zi Yuan recounted these historical allusions as if they were her family treasures. She was really knowledgeable, which was amazing. He secretly sighed at Zi Yuan's erudition and said, I see. The yang spirit is a spirit body, and its spiritual qi is extremely powerful. The burning thumb pot has the power to capture the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, so as long as the yang spirit gets close to it, the spiritual qi of the yang spirit will be automatically absorbed. Zi Yuan nodded and praised, yes, that's right. However, relying on the burning thumb pot alone is not enough, because the spiritual qi between heaven and earth is often very loose and thin, so it is naturally easy to capture. The evil qi of those demons is also naturally restrained by the Buddhist power of the burning thumb pot, so their spiritual qi is also easy to capture. However, the yang spirit of a cultivator is an extremely powerful spiritual energy body. There is not a trace of evil qi in its body, so it is naturally not restrained by the burning thumb pot. Moreover, the energy of the yang spirit is often condensed and vigorous. It is really difficult to rely on the magic power of the burning thumb pot to capture it. Even if you use all your strength, there is no guarantee that you will be able to capture the opponent's yang spirit. Li Yundong asked again, is there any other way? Zi Yuan said, yes. Li Yundong asked, what is it? Zi Yuan said, the last time you broke into Shiyuan Temple by mistake, you broke a magic formation and let 2 golden snakes escape. Do you remember? Li Yundong's eyes lit up. Ah, you mean. Zi Yuan nodded. That's right. The magic formation you broke last time was the Bafang demon subduing formation of Buddhism. This magic formation has an extremely powerful confinement effect. As long as the cultivation of the cultivator operating the magic formation is not more than double that of the people entering the formation, it is enough to confine the other party. Li Yundong suddenly understood and said, I see. As long as we lure Yan Fong into this Bafang demon subduing formation and then use the burning thumb pot to extract her spiritual qi, she can only be captured. Zi Yuan nodded slightly. That's right. Li Yundong clapped his hands and said loudly, well, I'll go find Du Fei now, and then I'll go find Master Purin of Shiyuan Temple. I'll exchange the heavenly Jin Dan technique with Du Fei for the burning thumb pot. 1 for 1. I believe he will do it. Moreover, Master Purin of Shiyuan Temple is righteous and will definitely help. Seeing Li Yundong speak confidently, Zi Yuan suddenly hesitated for a moment and said, Li Yundong, can I ask you something? Li Yundong had known Zi Yuan for a while. He had always been the one asking for help from her, but he had never seen her beg him. He suddenly shivered and said seriously, Zi Yuan, just ask. As long as I can do it, I will definitely do it. Zi Yuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and her heart was in turmoil. It could be said that she had watched Li Yundong grow up bit by bit from a layman. At first, he was just a reckless boy, and she didn't like him at all. But now, the speed of Li Yundong's growth was extremely astonishing. Even when her Shirbwa saw him, she didn't dare to fight him and ran away in a panic. Zi Yuan knew that her idea was tantamount to putting a noose around Yan Fong's neck. All that was left was for Yan Fong to deliver herself to Li Yundong. Then, as soon as Li Yundong twisted the rope, Yan Fong would not be able to escape. Although Zi Yuan believed that Yan Fong had entered the devil's way and was blinded by hatred, she still couldn't bear it. After all, she was her Shirbwa. Zi Yuan said softly, Li Yundong, can you promise me that if Yan Fong is willing to let go of her past grievances and hand over Ao Wushuang, can you let her go? Although Li Yundong had already guessed what Zi Yuan wanted to say, he still hesitated when he heard this. After a while, he raised his eyes and said seriously, Zi Yuan, you can be said to be half a teacher of mine. If I really catch Yan Fong and she is willing to give up and hand over Ao Wushuang, I can let her go. This is also a repayment for your kindness. Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, then I thank you on behalf of the Linggong sect. No matter what, she is my Shibwa. I appreciate your kindness very much if you are willing to let her go. Li Yundong smiled and said, however, I think she is a person who will not give up until she sees the coffin. She is very likely not to give up. Zi Yuan was worried and frowned slightly. Then there's no other way. This is her life, and also the life of our Linggong sect. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan was unhappy and frowned, as if she was holding his heart. For no reason, his heart suddenly softened. He sighed and said, forget it. As long as she is willing to hand over Ao Wushuang, whether she repents or not, I will let her go. But only this time, there will be no next time. Zi Yuan knew that the grudge between Yan Fong and the Fox Zen school was very deep. It could be said that Li Yundong had made the biggest concession by doing this. She was moved for a moment and said softly, thank you. The two of them looked at each other and then quickly dodged each other. It was like two small sparks suddenly colliding in the dark night, arousing a little light and then quickly dimming. Li Yundong felt that the atmosphere was a little wrong at this time. He coughed dryly and quickly changed the topic. By the way, I have another very important thing to trouble you with. Zi Yuan had been worried that Li Yundong and her Shibwa would fight to the death. She was in the middle and felt uncomfortable. At this time, with Li Yundong's promise, she suddenly felt as if a big stone had been lifted from her heart and she felt much more relaxed. She smiled slightly and said softly, as quiet and beautiful as an autumn leaf, immortally, I will do whatever you want me to do. Alas, when I returned to Suzhou today, I was exhausted. It was really tiring. Mother-in-law still needs to be operated on the 14th. And then I will have to go to Shanghai to take care of her. I will try to make up for it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. See. Chapter 437. Go to Watch Network. Su Chan's beauty was like the beginning of spring. Sometimes, she was playful and lovable. Sometimes, she was charming and enchanting. Sometimes, she exuded a charm that seeped into one's bones like the endless spring rain. Sometimes, she was innocent and naive. She was like the dappled sunlight in the shallow shade of the forest, brilliant and delightful. Zhou Qin's beauty was like winter and summer. When it was bitingly cold, it was like the coldest winter. 1,000 miles of ice, without a trace of vitality. Where it was silent and heartless, there was a sad and resolute beauty. But when she was in love, she seemed to be burning hot, wishing she could burn herself to ignite the other party and warm the other party. The beauty of Zi Yuan was like the quiet autumn. When she was serious, it was as if autumn was near in the sky, and the moon was clear on the earth. Her whole body exuded a kind of otherworldly elegance. But when she smiled lightly, it was like osmanthus in 3 autumn, and lotus blossoms in 10 miles, which made people feel relaxed and dazzled. It was not the first time that Li Yundong had seen Zi Yuan smile at him, but this time, Zi Yuan's smile made his heart beat faster. At this moment, for no reason, a poem appeared in Li Yundong's mind, sparse shadows slanting across the clear water, faint fragrance floating in the moonlight at dusk. At this time, although there were no sparse shadows of the trees, and there was no shallow gurgling of the small bridge, on the rooftop, under the moonlight, there was a faint fragrance that made people's hearts beat faster. It was as if the moonlight in the sky was much softer and more beautiful. Li Yundong even felt that the fairy in front of him was Chang'e, who had descended from heaven. She was breathtakingly beautiful, so beautiful that no one dared to blaspheme her. Li Yundong didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at Zi Yuan in a daze. Sometimes, the beauty of a woman had the power to captivate the soul. It could make the greatest hero in the world stupid, like a clay puppet. Zi Yuan seemed to have also noticed that the atmosphere was not right at this time, but she could not leave. For a moment, the fairy who had descended to the mortal world bit her lips lightly. Her cheeks flushed red, and her eyes were full of slight anger. A beauty's anger only doubled her beauty. This made Li Yundong even more dumbfounded. Although he loved Su Chan deeply, he was not a man with a heart of stone. If he could remain indifferent to a fairy who had descended to the mortal world and smiled at him, then he would not be a normal person. Zi Yuan felt a little uncomfortable under Li Yundong's gaze. She only felt that wherever Li Yundong's gaze fell on her body, that place would feel numb and itchy, just like the last time she and Li Yundong had been tied together. And in this numb and itchy feeling, there was a strange feeling that made people's hearts ripple. It was as if someone had thrown a small stone into a calm pool, causing waves of ripples. The two of them were frozen like that. It was as if time had stopped moving until Su Chan's voice suddenly rang out beside them. Yundong, you're here. I was looking for you. The little girl jumped onto the rooftop and shouted from afar. Her voice brought Li Yundong back to his senses. He withdrew his gaze as if he had just woken up from a dream and smiled awkwardly at Zi Yuan. However, Zi Yuan didn't even look at him. She quickly turned around and took a deep breath, as if she wanted to calm the waves in her heart. Li Yundong glanced at Zi Yuan's back embarrassedly. He saw that her ears were red and her neck was a seductive pink. He was a little flustered in his heart and said with a bitter smile, "Damn it, this fairy sister is getting more and more charming. I can't resist her." Li Yundong turned around, coughed dryly, and said to Su Chan, "Girl, it's so late. What do you want to do?" Only then did Su Chan realize that Zi Yuan was also not far away from Li Yundong. She blinked her eyes curiously and asked, "Sister Zi Yuan is also here. Do you have something to say? Shall I leave for a while?" Su Chan's words were unintentional, but Zi Yuan was listening attentively. Her body stiffened slightly, and her red lips opened slightly. She wanted to say something, but when the words were about to come out of her mouth, she swallowed them back for some reason. Seeing that Su Chan was about to leave, Li Yundong didn't dare to be alone with Zi Yuan. He quickly stopped her and said, "It's nothing. I'm discussing something with Zi Yuan. If you have anything to say, just say it." Su Chan said, "Oh, it's nothing. I just suddenly thought that since Yan Fang ran away again, will Sister Zhou Qin be in danger on the way to the Zhuji phase with the Liuhe? Will Yan Fang recover from her injuries and go to grab the sword?" Li Yundong saw that Su Chan was still thinking about Zhou Qin's safety at this time, which showed that her kindness was far beyond what others could compare with. He felt even more pity for her in his heart. He laughed and said, "Silly girl, I've already thought of what you've thought of. I just wanted Zi Yuan to help me." As he said this, he turned his face and said to Zi Yuan, "Actually, I wanted to ask you for help just now." At this time, Zi Yuan calmed down a little. She stroked her hair, composed herself, and said, "Do you want me to protect Zi Yuan?" Li Yundong nodded and said with some embarrassment, "I should have gone by myself, but now I really can't leave the Fox Zen school, so I have to ask you for a favor." Zi Yuan was also very clear that the journey of a cultivator to the Zhuji phase was extremely dangerous. If anything happened during the process, it would be unimaginable. Just like when Li Yundong was in the Zhuji phase, she had secretly protected him all the way. It was not until he succeeded in the Zhuji phase that she appeared and took him back. It was the same for her. When she was in the Zhuji phase, it was also Wang Yuanshan who had secretly protected her all the way. In order not to let her disciple become dependent on her and thus be unable to refine the Zhendan, as a master, she would never tell her disciple that she would protect her all the way. At that time, Zi Yuan hadn't told Li Yundong, and now Li Yundong hadn't told Zhou Qin either. After hearing Li Yundong's request, Zi Yuan agreed without hesitation. "Okay, no problem." Li Yundong was overjoyed. "Thank you so much. The journey to the Zhuji phase is long. Please take care of Zhou Qin along the way." Su Chan also smiled happily, but she suddenly said with some worry, "But Sister Zhou Qin has been walking for a day. How do we know which way she is going? Will we not be able to find her?" Ziyuan smiled and said, that won't happen. I told Hongling to follow Zhou Qin secretly. She will leave a mark for me along the way. Even if Yan Fang comes again, with her and the help of the Liuhe, Yan Fang, who has no powerful magical weapon, won't be able to do anything. Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan with admiration and said, I was wondering why I hadn't seen Hongling for a day. It turns out that you had already arranged it. Even if I hadn't asked you, you would have helped me, wouldn't you? Ziyuan smiled slightly and didn't answer Li Yundong's question. She changed the topic and said, Li Yundong, you don't have to worry about Zhou Qin. I'll leave the family and the shop to you these days. I'll set off later. You don't have to worry about Zhou Qin. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at Ziyuan. Then, watching her leave, he turned his face and said to Su Chan, by the way, Chaner, I also have something to trouble you with. Su Chan was afraid that Li Yundong would leave her and dislike her. As soon as she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately beamed with joy. She took Li Yundong's arm and said with a smile, okay, Chaner is not afraid of trouble. What can I do for you? Seeing the little girl's angry and happy appearance, Li Yundong's heart ached for her, but he was still a little worried and said, but you have to promise me first. You can't be a hindrance. Otherwise, I won't be able to go out at ease. Su Chan suddenly became nervous. She grabbed Li Yundong's hand tightly and said, Sir, are you going out? Aren't you going to take a girl with you? Li Yundong chuckled. He stroked the little girl's hair with his hand and said softly, Silly girl, I'm going out to do something. Just now, I was discussing with Ziyuan how to catch Yan Fang's yang spirit. When dawn comes, I have to find a powerful magical weapon that can catch Yan Fang, and then I have to go to Shiyuan Temple and ask Master Purin for help. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong with some disappointment. She begged unwillingly, that girl can also go with you. Don't leave her alone at home. You can ask someone else to help. Li Yundong smiled and said, Silly girl, now in the Fox Zen school, the only person I can trust is you. Now that Ziyuan and Wan Hongling have gone out, and Zhou Qin has also gone out to build the Zhuji phase, I will go out again. Although there are 2 Shibwa left in the Fox Zen school, I always feel that they are unreliable, and the remaining little foxes are all useless. I really have no one to trust. If I don't look for you, who else can I look for? Su Chan was unhappy when she heard this. She pouted and muttered in a low voice, it turns out that it's because there is no general in Sichuan who can be the vanguard. You still don't like me. If there were others, you would have looked for them, right? Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pretended to be angry, pinched the tip of the little girl's nose, and shouted in a low voice, be obedient. Do you still want your master to come back or not? Besides, haven't you always been clamoring to be the proprietress? Now that I've handed over the Desanxian store to you and let you manage it, you've become famous, haven't you? When Su Chan heard this, she was so happy that her eyes curved into crescents. You want me to be the proprietress? He, who's the boss? Li Yundong laughed and scolded her, deliberately provoking her, you already know the answer. Are you going to be the proprietress or not? If not, I'll let someone else do it. Su Chan quickly grabbed Li Yundong's arm and said with a smile, I didn't know you wanted me to do this. Of course. You're so annoying. You promised me, so you can't go back on your word. I can only be the proprietress. No one else can. Li Yundong shook his head with a smile and said, you little girl. Hey, I'm telling you, I don't need you to make money. You just need to watch over the store for me. Even if you don't make a single cent, it's fine as long as you don't cause any trouble. Su Chan said angrily, you're so annoying. Am I so useless? Li Yundong said seriously with a straight face, of course, it's useful. It's just that my little girl's talent is not in this aspect. Su Chan asked curiously, then what's my talent? Li Yundong burst into laughter. Your talent lies in causing trouble and causing trouble. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, "You're so annoying. How dare you laugh at me? You really don't like me." As she said this, the little girl threw herself on Li Yundong's back, scratching and biting. Li Yundong laughed and carried the little girl on his back. At the same time, he was afraid that she would fall off, so he held the little girl's round breasts and said with a smile, "Okay, okay. Anyway, don't make trouble, or I won't be at ease when I go out." Su Chan played with Li Yundong for a while, then said angrily, "Humph, I want to make some achievements to show you." Li Yundong was shocked. He looked back at Su Chan and saw that the little girl's face was serious. It didn't seem like she was joking. He quickly put on a straight face and said, "Hey, I'm serious. You have to promise me first that even if you don't open the store, don't cause trouble." Su Chan was so angry that she made threatening gestures. "Do I look like such a troublemaker?" Li Yundong nodded seriously. "You don't look like it. You're a big trouble." Su Chan suddenly burst into tears. "You dislike me, you already dislike me." Li Yundong felt a headache coming on. He quickly coaxed, "Well, I won't dislike you. You just have to be obedient and don't cause any trouble, okay? I'm begging you." Tears streamed down Su Chan's cheeks as she said pitifully, "I never wanted to cause you any trouble." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Yes, yes, my little girl is the best. Why would she want to cause trouble for me? You were just being careless. I say, little girl, can you be more careful this time? Even if we don't make money, don't cause trouble. We can't let anything happen to you now." Su Chan wiped away the tears on her face with her hands. She lowered her head and said in a muffled voice, "I know." Hearing her words, Li Yundong felt a little relieved, but he didn't see that the little girl was lowering her head at this time. Her eyes were rolling around, and her face was full of dissatisfaction. Her eyes seemed to be saying, "Humph, you look down on me, but I want to make money to show you." The update is late. Sorry, there will be another update later. See. Chapter 438. Go to Watch Network. Early the next morning, Li Yundong was ready to go out early. The little foxes also got up early. Ziyuan had already set off to protect Zhou Qin, so she didn't see Li Yundong off. Go to the watch net. After the storm last night, the little foxes, who were usually laughing and joking, had become a lot quieter. Their sect had changed a lot, and they had all become a little listless. Li Yundong saw this and sighed in his heart. Before he left, he called Su Chan to him and whispered, "Chaner, I'm not here, so I'll leave the sect to you. You have to show your courage and make your own decisions if there's anything you want to do. If you really can't make up your mind, you can call me." Su Chan blinked, and there was a sly look in her eyes. Li Yundong looked at the little girl's eyes and suddenly felt a little uneasy. He reminded her again, "You have to take good care of the shop. Don't make any trouble. We don't need to make money. We don't need that money. Do you understand?" Su Chan giggled and pushed Li Yundong out. She urged, "You're so annoying." "I know. Go, go. I promise to take good care of the shop." Li Yundong was pushed out by Su Chan with both hands. He kept turning his head to look at Su Chan and said with a strange expression, "Hey, you promised me that you wouldn't cause any trouble." Su Chan said unhappily, "Of course I won't cause any trouble. Do you look down on me? Do you really dislike this chick?" Seeing that Su Chan was raising the issue, Li Yundong could only smile bitterly and say, "Forget it. Even if you really cause trouble, I'll accept my fate. I just hope that you cause less trouble." Su Chan was overjoyed and said with a smile, "That's right. That's my good master. Humph, I don't believe that I can't take care of a small Desanxian." Seeing that Su Chan was about to show off, Li Yundong was shocked and couldn't help but shout in a low voice, "Hey, are you still angry? Do you think that you want to confuse the world when I give you the Shangfang sword? Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong. You're so annoying. I just want to do something serious. You're afraid of this and that. You don't support me at all. When Li Yundong heard this, he thought to himself, it really makes sense. Although the little girl was a little mischievous, her starting point for everything she did was good. It was just that because of some strange reasons, she finally messed things up. Sooner or later, she would learn to take over this tea house. What was wrong with letting her try it out now? If anything happens, I'll just treat it as a tuition fee. Besides, if you love someone, you should support her and let her do what she wants to do. It's not like it's some evil thing that goes against your conscience. Even if he caused trouble, could it be more difficult to deal with than the matter of him killing young Master He? In the past, he was poor and a penniless brat. At that time, he had already dealt with the troubles. Could it be that now that he was a sect leader, he still couldn't deal with these troubles? Thinking of this, Li Yundong simply made up his mind. He rubbed the little girl's hair and said, "Little girl, what you said makes sense. It was your master who thought wrongly. What do you want to do? Just do it. I fully support you. If it doesn't work, I'll just pretend that I never opened this Desangxian tea house." At first, Su Chan was still smiling and moved. When she heard the last sentence, her face suddenly fell. She used both hands to drive away Li Yundong's hands that were rubbing her hair. She covered her messy hair with her hands and stamped her feet coquettishly. After talking for a long time, you still don't believe that I can make money? Li Yundong laughed and said, even if you sell yourself, you might still have to count the money for others. Forget it, forget it. You can do whatever you want. Anyway, our background is strong enough now. We don't have to worry about other cultivation sects making trouble. Even if you make Desangxian collapse, I have a way to make it rise again. Su Chan was so angry in her heart. She gritted her teeth and thought to herself, damn it, Yundong still looks down on me. He doesn't believe that I can make money. I just want to make money for him. Humph. Li Yundong laughed for a while. He waved his hand at Su Chan and said, well, don't look so serious. I'm going out. Su Chan's mind was full of making money, and then making Li Yundong look at her in a new light. There was no pain of parting or lovesickness. She lowered her head and rolled her eyes. She was just waiting for Li Yundong to leave, so that she could show off her skills. Li Yundong didn't see Su Chan's expression. He just vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. Moreover, he had made up his mind to prepare for the worst. There can't be anything worse than the collapse of Desangxian, can there? Li Yundong gave a few more instructions to the two Shirbas and the other little foxes of the Fox Zen school, then he went out to look for Du Fei. After watching Li Yundong walk away, Su Chan closed the door. First, she asked Shibua Lu Yuehong innocently, Shibua, are you going to the store with us later? Lu Yuehong was still immersed in grief. She shook her head and said, Chaner, my heart is in a mess. I'm not in the mood to go. If I go, I'll only add to the chaos. I won't go. Su Chan looked at Zhuang Yiting again and said, Third Shibua, are you going? Zhuang Yiting sighed and said, Chaner, now that our Fox Zen school has undergone great changes, only the leader is left to support the overall situation. Although the sect leader is wise and powerful, and has a high cultivation level, he can't do anything alone. Every time something happens, I can't help him, and I feel very bad about it. I think I'd better stay at home and cultivate. Even if I can't help, I won't be a burden to everyone in the future. Su Chan blinked her eyes and watched the two Shirbas return to their rooms. Then, she turned to the little foxes and said, What about you? The little foxes looked at each other, and one of them said, I'll also accompany Third Shibua to cultivate at home. Another said, Shiji, I'll accompany you to the tea house. Another said, Shiji, I'm not in a good mood. I don't want to go anywhere. Seeing them talking at once, Su Chan suddenly put her hands on her hips and shouted, all of you, shut up. In the Fox Zen school, Su Chan had always been cute and kind. She never quarreled with others, nor did she get angry with others. Her loud shout immediately startled the little foxes and made them look at each other in dismay. They didn't understand why this little girl had suddenly become so strict. Su Chan put her hands on her hips, raised her head, and stuck out her chest like a general reviewing her troops. She shouted, do you know what's going on now? How can you still be sad? The little foxes looked at each other in confusion and shook their heads at the same time. Someone boldly asked, Shiji Su Chan, what happened? Is there anything more serious than Chao Yisherbu's death? Su Chan nodded hard and said loudly, yes, of course. Chao Yi is a cultivator. Although she's dead, it's not necessarily a kind of transcendence. What about us? We're struggling in this secular world and can't transcend it. If we can't live a happy life, wouldn't it be too miserable? The little foxes became more and more confused. They said one after another, but we're very happy in our daily lives. Su Chan stamped her feet and spat, bah. What do you know? The little foxes had never seen Su Chan lose her temper like this. They were all clever and knew that Su Chan was the closest to Li Yundong and was the most favored and trusted by him. She must have known some inside information that they didn't know. Thinking of this, they gathered around her and asked, what happened? That's right, Shiji Chan, tell us. Shiji Su Chan, tell us quickly. Su Chan snorted and fanned the flames, saying, do you know that the leader has begun to dislike us now? When the little foxes heard this, there was an uproar. Ah! It can't be, the sect leader treats us very well. That's right. Since when did the sect leader despise us? Su Chan put her hands on her hips and said bewitchingly, just now, leader said that we only know how to make trouble. He said that we can't earn a penny and that we're all losers. As soon as he said this, the little foxes looked at each other in dismay. They remembered that they had indeed caused a lot of trouble for Li Yundong in the Fox Zen school. Suddenly, they all felt uneasy and uneasy. Does the leader really dislike us? Seeing that her bewitchment had worked, Su Chan immediately struck while the iron was hot and said, now that leader has left, he has handed over Desanxian to us. This should have been a good thing, but do you know what he said before he left? The little foxes pricked up their ears and asked, what did leader say? Su Chan said indignantly, he said that he would hand over Desanxian to us and that he would pretend that it had never been opened. If it was destroyed by us, he could just open another one. Tell me, how much does leader look down on us? How much does he dislike us? Su Chan's previous words were all made up out of nothing, but only this sentence came from the bottom of her heart. It was reasonable and well-founded, so when she said it, she seemed to be particularly righteous and credible. The little foxes were filled with resentment when they heard this. They stamped their feet and said angrily, leader has gone too far. Are we so useless? Su Chan snorted and said, that's too much. There are even worse things to say. At this time, the little foxes were already angry, and they all shouted, what else? Say it, say it. Su Chan said loudly, I asked him, do we look like troublemakers? Yundong said, no, you are a group of big trouble. This time, it was a big uproar. The little foxes jumped up one by one, their faces full of anger. As the saying goes, a man lives with a face, and a tree lives with a layer of skin. The little foxes also needed face. His own sect leader actually looked down on him so much, how could he do that? No, they had to put on a good show for leader. Seeing that this group of little foxes had been teased by her, Su Chan waved her hand and imitated Li Yundong's usual imposing manner when he spoke. She said carelessly, now that Yundong is out, he thinks that we are useless and can only cause trouble. Do you think we should prove something to him? The little foxes were unprecedentedly unified. They said in unison, yes. We must prove to leader that we are not big trouble. Su Chan saw that she had provoked the little foxes with a few words, and they were no longer sad and mournful. She said proudly, let's go to Desanxian. Yundong said that we can't make money, so we will make money to show him. The little foxes said in unison, yes, yes, yes. Make money to show him. After that, Su Chan waved her hand, and the group of little foxes roared in agreement. They rushed to Desanxian tea house in a mighty and aggressive manner. The mistakes in chapter 437 have been corrected. Thank you for pointing them out. I've had a headache writing these days, so it's inevitable that there are some mistakes. Please forgive me. I will pay more attention in the future. These days, I've been a little messy. Please allow me to adjust myself. I will definitely return to my previous state. Thank you for your forgiveness. Today, I will update at 2 o'clock and 9 o'clock as usual. Chapter 439. Go to watch net. The little foxes rushed to the Desanxian tea house aggressively, but when they were ready to fight, they were suddenly stumped by a problem. It's easy to say that it's easy to make money, but how do you do it? It was always an irrefutable truth that it was easy to know but difficult to do. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Shimmy Su Chan, what do you think we should do? None of the little foxes could make a decision, so they could only look at Su Chan eagerly. But Su Chan was not someone who could come up with an idea. She had thought about it before, but when it really came down to it, she suddenly felt a little helpless. Su Chan looked at the empty tea house upstairs and downstairs. She thought blankly, when Yundong was here, there were no customers in this tea house. Now that it's our turn to run it, what can we do? After getting along with Li Yundong for a long time, Su Chan had subconsciously developed a strong dependence on him. She didn't have to worry about anything, and Li Yundong would naturally make the decisions. But when Li Yundong left, Su Chan suddenly felt a little at a loss. Although she wanted to prove something and had the ability to incite the little foxes to make trouble with her, she had no idea how to do it. Su Chan looked at the pairs of eyes staring at her. She didn't feel a little flustered, but now that things had come to this, she couldn't go back on her word. Su Chan was at a loss, so she thought about how Li Yundong had dealt with these things in the past. Soon, she had an idea and said seriously, this Desanxian tea house doesn't belong to me alone. We have to think of a way together. When the little foxes heard this, they looked at each other and said, Su Chan, you can make the decision. Su Chan didn't want to do it. She shook her head like a rattle drum and said, no, one person's wisdom is short, but everyone's wisdom is long. If we work together, we can always come up with a good idea. While she was talking, many guests had already gone in to drink tea in the tea house of Zhao, but their side was deserted. Su Chan pointed to the tea house of Zhao opposite Desanxian and said, when we opened, we greatly suppressed their limelight. Now we can't be weak. If they can have guests, why can't we? Let's all think about it. Why are the guests refusing to come in? One of the little foxes raised her hand and said weakly, didn't the sect leader say this before? Su Chan was stunned. Huh? Has Yundong already said it? The little foxes immediately said, yes, an old lady came before. Didn't she tell us the reason? Su Chan patted her head and said with some annoyance, I remember now. It's because there are too many beautiful women and officials here. The guests may think it's too expensive and dare not come in, right? The little foxes nodded their heads like chicks pecking rice. Yes. Su Chan stomped her feet angrily. Right? What right? I'm a natural-born beauty. Don't tell me the guests will come just because I'm an ugly freak. The little foxes all laughed and nodded in agreement. That's right. Su Chan saw that they were all laughing and hadn't come up with a single idea, so she said angrily, why are you still laughing? Hurry up and think of a way. If the guests don't come, we'll find a way to let them in. At this time, the little foxes did not speak. One of them lowered her head and rolled her eyes. Some of them looked at each other blankly, and some of them stared at the tips of their toes as if a flower had grown out of them. Su-chan saw that they had become silent at the last minute, so she said angrily, "Why aren't you talking? Weren't you very aggressive just now?" At this time, one of the little foxes boldly said, "Su-chan Shiji, it was you who encouraged us just now." Su-chan was so angry that she said angrily, "Don't you have any shame? Is that what I was doing? That's fanning, ahem, that's calling the hearts of the people." Seeing that none of the little foxes were willing to stand up for her when she asked them to come up with ideas, she made up her mind. She pointed at one of the little foxes and said, You think of a way." The little fox's name was Lingyu. She had a palm-shaped face, picturesque eyebrows, and vermilion lips. When she saw Su-chan pointing at her, she exclaimed in surprise, "Me? Me?" Su-chan nodded and said, "Yes, you. You think of a way." Lingyu glanced at the others and saw that these senior sisters and junior sisters, who usually called each other sisters, quickly moved their gazes away. Those who were close to her simply moved away quietly, as if saying that it was better for them to die than to die. Lingyu felt wronged in her heart. She muttered, "There are so many people, but why did you call me?" Su-chan saw her muttering, and she could hear what she was saying clearly, but she simply played dumb and asked, "What did you just say?" Lingyu smiled apologetically and said, "Su-chan Shiji, I really can't think of any good ideas." Su-chan said angrily, "Even if you can't think of one, you have to." Lingyu's face was full of indignation. "Why?" Su-chan also said angrily, "Because I'm the boss wife." This sentence immediately made Lingyu feel discouraged. It was really a case of having a higher position than others. She lowered her head in annoyance and subconsciously looked at her Shiji and Shimmy, only to see them all covering their mouths and snickering, taking pleasure in her misfortune. She felt depressed in her heart. However, Lingyu suddenly heard melodious music coming from outside the pedestrian street. It was the music that some shops were playing to attract customers' attention. She suddenly had an idea. She raised her head and said excitedly, "I've got a way, I've got a way." Su-chan quickly asked, "What way?" Seeing that she had actually come up with a way, the other little foxes also looked at her curiously and asked at once, "Say it, Lingyu, say it." "Oh, I knew that Lingyu Shimmy is the smartest. You really live up to our expectations. Ha ha ha, I have high hopes for you." Lingyu rolled her eyes at them and said to Su-chan, "Su-chan Shiji, look at the shops outside playing music to attract customers. Do you think we can also play music to attract customers?" When Su-chan heard this, she was overjoyed. "That's a good idea." When the other little foxes saw that Lingyu's method had been adopted, they all felt relieved. They didn't have to worry about being interrogated by Su-chan anymore. They gathered around and said noisily, "That's right, I've thought of this method for a long time. I just didn't say it out loud." Su-chan was furious. She turned her head and glared at them. "What are you talking about? I'll let you come up with another idea." This time, the little foxes immediately retracted their heads and covered their mouths, not daring to speak again. Seeing that the arrogance of the little guys had been suppressed, Su-chan turned her face and said to Lingyu, "Well, it's a good idea, but what should we play? We don't have such sound equipment." The little girl had been in the secular world for a long time, and she knew more and more things. She soon saw the difficulty of this method. Lingyu asked tentatively, "Then, shall we buy one first?" Su-chan was stunned for a moment. Buy one? How much?" A little fox immediately raised her hand and shouted eagerly, I know. I noticed it when I went shopping last time. There are cheap and expensive ones. The cheap ones are only a few hundred yuan." Su-chan thought for a moment and said, after all, our tea house has been visited by the governor. We can't lower our status by selling such junk, can we? How much is the expensive one? If we're going to use it, we'll use the expensive one. The little fox immediately quoted the price like a machine gun, 166,888 yuan. As soon as the price was quoted, Su Chan and the little foxes gasped. Su Chan shook her head like a rattle. No, we can't afford it even if we sell ourselves. Besides, we haven't earned a penny yet. How can we spend so much money? Can we earn it back? Seeing that Ling Yu's idea was obviously going to fail, the little foxes were afraid that Su Chan would ask them again, so they began to flatter her. Su Chan, you're so right. You're really wise and intelligent. As they spoke, they pointed at Ling Yu and said, Ling Yu, look at what idea you've come up with. Ling Yu was so angry that she shouted, then come up with an idea. The little foxes immediately distanced themselves from her and drew a clear line. You came up with the first idea, so naturally, you have to be responsible for the second one. To be an excellent fox spirit, you have to finish what you started. Ling Yu was furious. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, wanting to pounce on these immoral guys. Su Chan saw that they were about to fight among themselves before they even welcomed a single guest. She hurriedly comforted Ling Yu and said, Ling Yu, your idea is good, but it's not feasible. Think of another feasible one. Ling Yu said angrily, what can I do? Su Chan Shiji, aren't you forcing the ducks onto the perch? Su Chan coaxed her and said, I'm forcing the foxes onto the perch. Be obedient and think of another idea. When Yindong comes back, I'll ask him to give you more pocket money and not give it to these guys. Hearing this, Ling Yu was overjoyed. She clapped her hands and laughed. That's good. When the other little foxes heard this, they all said unhappily, No, how can you do this? Su Chan put her hands on her hips and said angrily, then you should also think of a way. Since it was such a big matter as pocket money, the little foxes didn't dare to neglect it. They all tilted their heads and frowned, thinking hard. After a while, Ling Yu was the first to come up with a solution. She asked tentatively, Su Chan Shiji, since we can't afford to buy a stereo or something, why don't we just sing by ourselves? The little foxes' eyes lit up and they all shouted, Yes, I have the same idea. Yes, don't we know how to sing by ourselves? Yes, do it by ourselves. Leader said that if we do it by ourselves, we will have enough food and clothing. Su Chan was overjoyed and said, Yes, that's a good idea. But what should we sing? Ling Yu smiled and said, What else can we sing? Of course, we can sing it. Anyway, we only know a few songs back and forth. Su Chan quickly asked, Which ones do you know? Without thinking, Ling Yu blurted out, Second sister Wang misses her husband. Su Chan was instantly dumbfounded. She was dumbfounded and tongue-tied. She stammered, What? Wang, second sister Wang misses her husband? The other little foxes also said, There are others. Su Chan asked in a daze, What else? The little foxes were proud of themselves. They shook their heads and said in unison, The little widow visits the grave. Although Su Chan was a little naive, she was not a fool. When she had returned to Mount Tianlong with Li Yundong last time, she had seen Li Yundong being shocked by the song sung by the Fox Zen school. He had almost gone crazy. Although she didn't know what was wrong with singing this song, she always felt that it was a little inappropriate to sing, Second sister Wang misses her husband, and The little widow visits the grave, in such a dignified and elegant tea house. The little foxes didn't think so much. In their opinion, in this situation, they had to deal with Su Chan as soon as possible. As for their previous anger, they had long thrown it out of their minds. Li Yundong's contempt was far away, and they could slowly deal with it when the leader came back. But Su Chan was forcing them to come up with ideas, which was really killing them. Thinking of this, the little foxes all shouted, Su Chan, don't think so much. Just sing this song. Su Chan's eyes went blank. She said in a low voice, the tea house of Desanxian is singing second sister Wang misses her husband and the little widow visits the grave. This doesn't seem very good, does it? The little foxes said in unison, good, very good. If you don't believe me, listen to us sing. I guarantee that there will be a lot of guests. Seeing that the little foxes were a little out of control, Su Chan cried in her heart, oh no, oh no. This is definitely not right. Something is definitely going to happen. Alas, I shouldn't have let them come up with ideas. I had thought that one person's wisdom was short, but everyone's wisdom was long. However, why did it look like one person's wisdom was long, but everyone's wisdom was short? Chapter 440. Please remember the domain name of this site. Or search on Baidu, Somlian Literature website. Seeing that the little foxes were about to sing, the little widow goes to the grave, and Wang Erji misses her husband, two very harmonious folk tunes, Su Chan suddenly felt a headache coming on. She secretly regretted it. I can't mobilize the people at will. Now it's all over. Just when she was at her wit's end, she suddenly saw a fiery red Lamborghini rushing to the tea house. A beautiful woman in a black uniform and short skirt jumped out of the car. Before she entered the building, she shouted angrily, Li Yundong, come out. Su Chan took a closer look and said curiously, hey, isn't this Chow Kefi, President Chow? Su Chan quickly stopped the little foxes who were about to sing and greeted Chow Kefi as if she had seen her savior. Oh, President Chow, why are you here? Come in, come in. Chow Kefi was surprised by Su Chan's enthusiasm. She was stunned for a moment and said casually, where's Li Yundong? Where is he? Hurry up and ask him to come out. This bastard has gone too far. Su Chan welcomed Chow Kefi into the tea house and sat down. She enthusiastically poured tea for her and asked, President Chow, what did Yundong do to you? Chow Kefi looked around the tea house, as if she was looking for Li Yundong's whereabouts. She said angrily, do I still need to mention it? Last night, he tortured me so much that he ran away without saying a word. Am I just air in his eyes? Does he think he can come and go as he pleases? Chow Kefi was a little speechless. The little foxes smiled ambiguously and looked at Su Chan, oh. So the leader went out to eat? Although Su Chan knew that there was no such thing, she still felt a little upset. She said slightly angrily, President Chow, what are you talking about? Only then did Chow Kefi react. She quickly patted her forehead and apologized to Su Chan with a smile, I'm sorry, I was so angry that I was confused. Last time, Li Yundong asked me to pretend to be injured and lie in the hospital, saying that he wanted to lure out the real murderer for me. But he was caught, and his soul ran away with him. His body stayed there like a clay puppet for a long time. When he finally came back to his senses, he ran away again without saying a word. I can't even get through to his cell phone. What do you think is going on? As she spoke, Chow Kefi became excited again. She stood up and looked around. Where's Li Yundong? Ask him to come out and give me an explanation. What the hell is this? Only then did Su Chan understand why Chow Kefi was questioning her. She quickly smiled and said, President Chow, Yundong went out early in the morning. Chow Kefi said angrily, is he avoiding me? Am I that scary? Su Chan smiled apologetically and explained what had happened the day before. She only hid their true identities. After hearing what had happened, Chow Kefi's anger gradually subsided. She sat down slowly and sighed softly. It turned out that I was being unreasonable. I didn't expect so many things to happen. Su Chan brought the teacup to Chow Kefi and said with a smile, yes, Yundong went out early in the morning to prevent Yen Fong from hurting you again. Chow Kefi had always been very confused. She had no grudge against Yen Fong, so why did she want to kill her? Chow Kefi took the teacup and drank it in one gulp. She asked curiously, has this matter been reported to the police? Su Chan shook her head and said, President Chow, you should know that we are not ordinary people. We are cultivators. The affairs of cultivators should be solved in the cultivation world. We can't involve the secular world. Chow Kefi sighed and said, when I first saw Li Yundong, I felt that he was not an ordinary person. Now it seems that this guy is really not an ordinary person. Su Chan poured tea for Chow Kefi and said with a smile, when I first saw him, I didn't think he was anything special. Chow Kefi laughed and gave Su Chan a meaningful look. Looking at Su Chan's young and beautiful face, she suddenly felt a little sour in her heart for no reason. She thought to herself, why did God let me meet Li Yundong, my enemy? This damned enemy is so elusive. When he needs help, he will appear. When he doesn't need help, he will disappear without a trace. Damn it, damn it. Thinking of this, Chow Kefi couldn't help but feel resentful. She looked around and asked, is today the first day of business? Li Yundong didn't even show up on the first day of business? He just left such a big business to you? That's too much. Hearing this, Su Chan's heart skipped a beat and she thought to herself, yes, President Chow is a strong business person. She must have a way, and the way she comes up with is definitely better than ours. Su Chan immediately asked, by the way, President Chow, we are worried. Since this tea house opened, no customers have come. I'm so worried that my hair is going to turn white. Hurry up and think of a way for us. Chow Kefi's mind was on Li Yundong, her enemy. She replied casually, in fact, it's very simple. The hardware facilities of your tea house are good, but the software facilities are a little worse. Naturally, no customers will come. Su Chan blinked her eyes and asked, what software facilities? When the other little foxes saw that Su Chan had finally changed her target and wouldn't let them come up with any ideas, they immediately felt relieved. They gathered around and looked at Chow Kefi eagerly, waiting for her to come up with an idea. Chow Kefi acted as if she hadn't seen them and said casually, it's service. If you sit here foolishly, of course no customers will take the initiative to come in. The hardware of your tea house is at the level of Shangri-La, but the software is far inferior. It should match the level of Shangri-La. Su Chan listened in a daze. Although she didn't fully understand, she finally understood what Chow Kefi had said, get customers. But, how to solicit customers? Su Chan wanted to ask again, but she saw that Chow Kefi seemed to be in a daze. She swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth, a little embarrassed to disturb her again. But after thinking for a while, the little girl didn't know what to do, so she turned her head to discuss with the little foxes. Hey, what is Shangri-La? Su Chan asked in a low voice. The little foxes looked at each other in dismay. How could they answer her question? Only Lingyu boldly said, does it mean to pull the guests in enthusiastically? Su Chan was stunned. Before she could speak, the little foxes pretended to understand and nodded one by one. Well, it's very possible. That's right. Su Chan felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't think of a good way, so she turned her face back and asked Chow Kefi tentatively in a low voice, President Chow, what does Shangri-La mean? Chow Kefi didn't hear Su Chan's words at all. She was in a daze and replied casually, yes, you have to be enthusiastic and take the initiative in doing business. Su Chan suddenly understood. Oh, does Shangri-La mean to pull customers in enthusiastically? Understanding this, Su Chan turned her face and said to Lingyu, you go to the Shangri-La at the door. Lingyu was dumbfounded. She widened her eyes and pointed at her nose. I'll go? Su Chan glared at her. Of course, do you want me to go? Lingyu looked aggrieved and glanced at the other little foxes. Why don't they go? The other little foxes immediately drew a clear line with her and said one after another, you're the one who said Shangri-La. Of course, you should go. Ling Yu cried out in grievance, "Why do I have to go for everything?" Seeing this, Su Chan quickly coaxed her, Okay, when Yundong comes back, I'll ask him to give you more pocket money." Ling Yu looked indignant. "I want double." Su Chan's face darkened. "We haven't even had a customer come in yet, and you're already bargaining. If you don't get any customers in, I'll double your pay." Ling Yu cursed in her heart, but the status and prestige of the lady boss couldn't be ignored. If she went back and blue pillow talk, how could she go about it? Ling Yu didn't dare to argue. She could only curse in her heart and walk to the door unhappily. As soon as she walked to the door, she saw a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes poking his head into the tea house. Ling Yu was overjoyed. She hurriedly ran over and said in a greasy voice, "Sir, would you like to come in and have a cup of tea?" The man was shocked. He saw that Ling Yu was exceptionally beautiful, and her eyebrows and posture revealed a kind of seductive charm that ordinary women didn't have. His heart suddenly thumped and he stammered, Sir. Ling Yu quickly corrected herself. "Sir, would you like to have a cup of tea?" The little fox's voice was delicate, but the man's bones softened a little. He asked foolishly, How much is a cup of tea?" How could Ling Yu know this? She turned her head and shouted at Su Chan, "Madam, how much is a cup of tea?" Su Chan was also stumped. This was the first day she had taken over the tea house. Not to mention how much a cup of tea cost, she didn't even know what kinds of tea there were in the tea house. Seeing that a customer was showing signs of interest, Su Chan didn't want to miss this auspicious opening opportunity. She hurriedly trotted out and said with a smile, "It's very cheap. Come in and have a drink." As soon as she ran out, the other little foxes also ran out and said, "That's right. Come in and have a drink." The man saw so many young and beautiful girls running out of the tea house. Although they were all different in appearance, they were all stunning beauties. He was shocked and thought to himself, "Oh my God, there are so many top-grade beauties in a tea house. How much does a cup of tea cost? I will go bankrupt, won't I? Forget it, I won't be able to explain to my wife when I go back. I'd better leave quickly." But even though he was thinking this, how many men could really have the willpower to turn around and leave gracefully in front of such beautiful women? The man turned his body halfway, but his feet seemed to have taken root and he couldn't move no matter how hard he tried. Seeing this, Su Chan quickly winked at the other little foxes. The little foxes understood and said with a smile, "Sir, come in and have a cup of tea." After that, they pulled the man and hugged him as they walked inside. Surrounded by so many little foxes, the man's reaction time and intelligence had dropped a lot. He was pulled in a daze. At this time, Chow Kefi, who was sitting in the hall, came to her senses when she heard the noise. She saw the group of little foxes almost carrying a man in. The man kept looking back, his eyes frightened and uneasy, but his feet were involuntarily pulled in. His steps were light, as if he were walking on clouds. Chow Kefi was shocked. After Su Chan and the others took the guest to the second floor and sat down, she greeted Su Chan, called her over, and whispered, "Hey, what are you doing?" Su Chan blinked and asked in confusion, "We're soliciting customers." Chow Kefi was shocked and stammered, Are you soliciting customers?" Su Chan giggled and said, "Didn't you say so? It's called Shangri-La, doesn't it mean to enthusiastically pull the guests in?" Chow Kefi almost collapsed. Is that what Shangri-La means? How can you see this layer of meaning? Besides, even if that's what it means, is this Shangri-La? You're just trying to pull people in. To quickly find this site, please search on Baidu, Somnian Literature website. Chapter 441. Please remember the domain name of this site. Or search on Baidu, Somnian Literature website. Su Chan looked at Chow Kefi's frantic expression and asked in confusion, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Chow Kefi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course not. Su Chan was tongue-tied. But, that's what you told me just now. Chow Kefi was dumbfounded. I said that? How is that possible? Su Chan quickly turned her head to look upstairs, looking for reinforcements. She shouted, "Hey, did President Chow just say that Shangri-La means to enthusiastically pull guests in?" Her voice was crisp and clear. All the little foxes poked their heads out and looked down. They shouted in unison, "Yes, President Chow said it." We all heard it. Chow Kefi raised her head to take a look. Wow, this row of beautiful girls with bright eyes, white teeth, red lips, and white teeth was really an enchanting scene. The only thing that was a little discordant was the guest who was forcibly dragged in. He also stuck his head out, his face full of resentment as he wanted to take a look at the initiator of all this. Chow Kefi quickly withdrew her gaze and said with a dry smile, "Su Chan, this is a misunderstanding. Shangri-La is a ranking, not the meaning of pulling guests in, and, even if it is, you can't force guests in. This business has to be consensual." As soon as she finished speaking, the middle-aged guest upstairs immediately shouted, "Yes, yes, let me go. I can't afford to drink your tea." When the little foxes heard this, they were unhappy. They thought to themselves, "It's not easy for a guest to come. How can we let him go? No, 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 at least open the shop first." Ling Yu grabbed the middle-aged man and said with a smile, this guest, since you are already here, why don't you at least drink a cup of tea before you leave?" The other little foxes also came forward one after another to persuade him to stay with a smile. This middle-aged man had never encountered such a scene before. These little foxes were all stunning beauties. They were fat and thin, and when they started acting coquettishly, even Li Yundong couldn't resist them, let alone this middle-aged man. The middle-aged man felt as if all the blood in his body had rushed to his head. His face was as red as a pig's liver. He stammered, "Then, shall we have a drink?" Ling Yu and the rest were overjoyed. They clapped and laughed, "Great, great, we can finally open our business." Su Chan was also overjoyed. She hurriedly trotted upstairs. Chow Kefi looked up at the upstairs, feeling sorry for the middle-aged man in her heart. She thought to herself, "I, Chow Kefi, have been in the film and television industry for some years, but I've never seen so many beautiful women born with natural charm and beauty. Any one of these beauties wasn't something an ordinary man could handle, let alone so many of them. If he could still say no under such circumstances, then he would be either a Buddha or a Hun." Thinking of this, Chow Kefi shook her head and thought to herself, "Today, I originally came to find Li Yundong, but who would have thought that a wrong word would cause such a thing? If this little enemy finds out later, he might blame me. I'd better leave quickly." Chow Kefi stealthily picked up her purse and keychain, and quietly walked out. At this time, the little fox's attention was all on the middle-aged man. No one noticed that the initiator was about to sneak away. At first, Chow Kefi felt a little guilty. She sneaked to the door, but no one stopped her. She boldly looked back, only to see that the middle-aged man on the second floor had been so fascinated by the array that he couldn't recognize anything. She muttered in a low voice, "My dear friend, good luck. I'll leave first." After that, she quickly ran out of the tea house, got into the car, stepped on the accelerator, and disappeared. At this time, the middle-aged man was in the tea house. In front of him, there were beautiful young girls with pleasant appearances. They were busy helping him set up the tea set and taking care of everything around him. He looked around and saw that in addition to these little beauties in the tea house, all of them were incomparably stunning. The decor was also very classy and stylish. There was an antique charm everywhere. With one look, he could tell that the design was original and ingenious, and it was the work of a master. The middle-aged man panicked even more. He thought to himself, "It seems that I can't escape today. I wonder how much a cup of tea in such a high-end tea house will cost." Thinking of this, he carefully asked Lingyu, who was the most enthusiastic, "Excuse me, how much is a cup of tea here?" Lingyu blinked and turned to look at the other little foxes. The other little foxes also blinked and turned to look at Su Chan. When Su Chan saw that everyone was looking at her, she subconsciously looked downstairs at Chow Kefi. She wanted to ask her opinion, but when she looked, she saw that the downstairs was empty. There was no one there. Chow Kefi had already disappeared without a trace. Su Chan complained in her heart, but she suddenly had an idea. She said with a smile, "It's very cheap. What kind of tea would you like to drink, sir?" When the middle-aged man heard the word "very cheap," he became even more uneasy. He thought to himself, "It seems that black market businessmen who cheat customers will say this, right?" He asked tentatively, "What kind of tea do you have here?" Su Chan was delighted. "I know this girl." She counted her fingers and said as if she were counting her family treasures, "We have Junshan silver needles here, as well as the most high-end Biyao silver needles. Of course, if you don't like Junshan silver needles, Biyao silver needles, we also have Xinyang silver needles and Jinghe silver needles here." As the little girl spoke, she set the tea set aside, looked at the middle-aged man eagerly, and asked, "Sir, would you like to try some Biyao silver needles?" Su Chan was not only beautiful and charming, but her voice was also soft and innocent, revealing a kind of bone-melting softness. The middle-aged man was fascinated by Su Chan and nodded subconsciously. However, as soon as he nodded, he regretted it and asked, "How much?" Su Chan said with a smile, "It's not expensive. It's very cheap." After that, she immediately asked the little foxes to boil water. After a while, when the water in the small teapot boiled, she began to make tea herself. The little girl's talent and understanding were extremely high. These days, she had also learned some tea skills from Zi Yuan. In addition, she was a great beauty who could bring disaster to a country and cause suffering to the people. Even if she didn't know how to make tea, just sitting there added a bit of aroma to the tea. As Su Chan made the tea, she said softly, "Here, this is the finished tea of Biyao silver needles. Look at the fat buds, covered with white hairs, and they are as straight as needles. How about it? Is it authentic?" The middle-aged man stared at Su Chan eagerly and nodded, saying, "Authentic, authentic." He didn't know whether he was talking about the tea leaves or Su Chan. After nodding, he subconsciously asked, "How much is it?" Su Chan was a little unhappy with the question. She glared at him and said, "You're so annoying. You always ask about the price. Tasting tea is a very elegant and artistic thing. Don't make it smell like money, okay?" The middle-aged man smiled embarrassedly and said, "Yes, yes." But in his heart, he felt very wronged and muttered, "If it's really elegant, don't force me to come in." Su Chan didn't know what the middle-aged man was thinking. She continued, "Look, the shape of this Biyao silver needles is unique among famous teas. It's really a treasure among teas. Tasting it and drinking it, it has a unique flavor. Look, the silver light in this cup of tea is shining, and the silver needles are standing upright like spears, rising and falling. Isn't it beautiful?" The middle-aged man stretched his neck and took a look. Sure enough, he saw the silver needles and tea leaves standing upright in the teacup, like a forest of spears. He couldn't help but nod and praise, "Yes, it's beautiful." Su Chan smiled and brought the teacup to him. "It's better to drink than to look at it." The middle-aged man smelled the fragrance of the tea and felt that it was refreshing. For a moment, he forgot the grievance of being forced to come in and the anxiety of being cheated at any time. He picked up the teacup, blew it gently, and then drank it in one gulp. After drinking this cup of tea, the middle-aged man's eyes suddenly lit up, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Good, good tea." He subconsciously reached for his wallet and said carefully, "After drinking the tea, you should let me go, right?" But unexpectedly, Su Chan saw that he drank the tea like a pig eating ginseng fruit. She suddenly became angry and said, "How can you drink tea like this? Besides, how can you only drink 1 cup of tea?" The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. He put his hand down from his wallet and said timidly, "Do you still want to drink?" Su Chan said angrily, "Of course, the first cup of tea is not the most delicious. The first cup is like a virgin, delicate but a little immature. The most delicious is the second cup of tea. At this time, the tea is like a young woman, the most amorous and memorable." After that, Su Chan made another cup of tea and brought it to the middle-aged man. Just listening to Su Chan's words, the middle-aged man felt that his imagination was running wild and his desire was eroding his bones. He took the tea in a daze and carefully drank it up this time. Then, he smacked his lips and sighed, "It really tastes different." Su Chan smiled and waved to the little foxes beside her, indicating for them to change the tea leaves. The middle-aged man watched them change the tea leaves and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why did you change the tea leaves? You've only made it twice." Su Chan smiled and said, "The tea made by the 3rd time is like a middle-aged woman. Although it's still charming, it's too old to be used to entertain guests." Before the middle-aged man could understand, he saw Su Chan smiling at him again and saying, "You've drunk the silver needle. We still have Maojian tea here. Among them, we have Xinyang Maojian tea, Maoping Maojian tea, Duyun Maojian tea, and Huangshan Maojian tea. What would you like to drink?" The middle-aged man was dumbfounded. "Ah. You want more? How much is this Maojian tea?" Su Chan glared at him and said, "Why are you asking for the price again?" The middle-aged man immediately shrank his head and said with an apologetic smile, "I'm just asking casually." Su Chan's anger turned into joy and she said, "Don't worry, it's very cheap. I won't charge you more." When the middle-aged man heard this, his heart suddenly beat like a drum. "Oh my God, the more you say this, the more you'll charge me later. Will I be able to walk out of this door alive today?" After a while, he saw Su Chan make another cup of Xinyang Maojian tea on her own, and then bring over 2 cups of tea. The middle-aged man took a sip and felt that the tea was fragrant, making him feel like he was floating. Although this feeling was wonderful, the more he drank, the more flustered and frightened he became. When Su Chan was about to make him a 3rd kind of tea, the middle-aged man finally couldn't stand it anymore. He rose to his feet with a fearless look on his face and shouted, "I can't drink any more unless you tell me how much tea I drank." Su Chan saw that the other party's attitude was surprisingly tough, and she was a little discouraged. She thought for a moment and tentatively stretched out a finger. "So much?" As soon as the middle-aged man saw this finger, his legs and stomach suddenly trembled. He fell into his seat and howled with a pale face, 10,000? Oh my God, do you want me to live?" To quickly find this site, please search on Baidu, Somnian Literature website, that you're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.